Welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings. You all know the drill. Well, for those of you who are familiar with ramblings, do know the drill. Those of you who are unfamiliar do not know the drill. Did I do it again? Ah, fuck. Damn it. I think it was... Oh, yeah, it's because Drax showed up last week. That's... Oh, no, was that the week before? I can't remember. Anyway, I think it turns itself on and off at will at this point. Because I turn it off and it stays off for weeks, and then literally 1 week it's just like, I'm going to turn myself back on again. Drac is not showing up. Fuck, I have to be careful saying his name. I did not confirm Drac is showing up. Drac is not showing up. Drac is not showing up. Yes, you can start asking. Crikey, a lot of you today. Oh, hi, welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings. When does Drac appear? He doesn't appear today. I mean, I can ask if you'd like, but he's possibly busy. I don't like troubling the man at short notice. And again, it has been a good... Fuck, it's been a good 5 weeks since. How does my Shard mark compare to Drax improved Bismarck? Drax improved Bismarck has a single secondary battery, whereas mine has still the mixed 15 centimeter and 105 battery. Mine is just a Scharnhorst with extended length to fit an extra turret. Drax is a full rework of the Bismarck design and is a more mature ship. It's also lacking a lot of the... Because yes, the Scharnhorst do have some of the flaws of Bismarck, but they're much better built. What arm would I give an Iowa if the pom-pom had won out over the Bofors for US Navy service? Oh.
A bunch of them?
Just pom-poms everywhere. Octuple mounts for days. Just give him some fucking tracer. Make sure we give him tracer rounds.
Oh yeah, man! Imagine the fucking light show. That'd look sick.
Yeah.
Why does it take so long for the Royal Navy to start building triples?
World War One, basically. World War One basically put a halt to all major capital ship design and construction, and any new construction had to be very much similar to what was already built to speed up the design process to get the hulls on the slipways as fast as possible. It's why instead of some brilliant new design for the Renowns, you just get basically a Revenge with one less turret and extra machinery put in. It's why for Hood...
It's a turret style that they already knew how to build, that they already knew how to fight. They didn't have to think about it. The knowing how to fight it is also an important aspect, right? They've got systems worked out for manipulation of shot and powder in the turret. They know how to coordinate that, they know how to make that work.
Well, you gremlins, you fucking made me do it. I've asked Drac very, very nicely. I've told him that you were all asking if he was going to show up, so I've asked him very nicely whether or not he will. But it's not confirmed. It is not confirmed.
Anyhow, continuing right along.
Gremlins. Yo, we getting
God damn it.
Hood, you bastard. No. No. Well, fuck it. We ball, I guess. Okay, Rune. All right, fuck it, Hood. You fucking back me into a corner. Why don't you? Absolute lemon. No, for fuck's sake, no! I'm doomed. I'm doomed. I'm basically fucked. No, we have a Drac. Yes. Hello, I'm Discount Drakidafel. How are you doing? I am Poundland Drac. I'm Budget Drac Shifter. There's fucking. Oh, for fuck's sake! That meme will never. That meme will never fucking die.
Good one though.
It is a good one. All right, Marshall Rune asks.
Thanks, Hood. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Hood. Well done. Well done. He's like, it's great, fantastic.
Because I want to get to a question that's just been asked. So let's.
All right.
Let's keep moving.
For some reason, World War II, as we know it, straight up doesn't happen. Maybe a rather tense relationship between countries, but that's it. I guess for some reason, the Great Depression didn't happen, and the world simply didn't allow extremism to rise. If by extremism you mean fascism, fascism in Italy rose in 1921, and the Soviet Union rose before that. Okay, the basic premise of your question is: will people realize the age of battleships is slipping away? And oh no, myself and Random Idiot can
Do
go.
they continue to build battleships? Yes.
Oh yeah, because I mean we can. I mean I know I'm gonna.
They did anyway.
Yeah.
When does fuck, what's it called?
Oh, the
British
Stalingrads.
one.
The Lion class designs
When does-
were considered until about the late 40s, and the Stalingrads were. I mean, they're not battleships; but they're still big gun surface combatants. Were laid down in the late 40s, and were only stopped construction in the 50s.
The age of the battleship was not immediately rendered obsolete. It was a gradual process. Now, admittedly, some of that may have been conservatism in the Navy. But they still provided a capability. And some people can still consider that capability important enough that they kept doing it. If you don't see a major naval war in the early 40s, battleships probably...
Okay.
Battleships probably stick around longer in service because they don't physically get stunk in the same quantities.
And also, everyone still has the big scary monsters in reasonable numbers, so you need to keep building the big scary monsters in reasonable numbers until something comes along that can definitively kill, and it's been proven to kill the big scary monsters. This is the thing.
Because remember,
it's definitive
navies
proof of the kill.
Yeah, various navies in the world knew that air power was going to be the deciding factor very early on, right? We see that, like, that's really a mid to late 30s revelation, at least for the people who were operating carriers. They know that that's going to be the new status quo. They might not want to admit it, but they recognize that change.
Yep.
Moving on. All right.
Your question
about nuclear flat tops and literally just plugging reactors in and saying good enough. So for CVN-65, yes. CVN-65 has 8 nuclear reactors that are each designed to one-for-one replace the conventional boiler on a Kitty Hawk.
Well, that's it. I've just signed my own death warrant.
Literally.
I've just signed
one for one.
I've just signed my own death warrant.
Have you now?
Yep, there we go. Look at the bottom of chat.
Once they figured out that they could build a larger reactor, that there weren't going to be a lot of issues with that, they figured out better ways to do that. Modern ones are designed from the ground up, around 2 reactors usually. But in the very early days, yes, they literally just replaced boilers with reactors.
Yeah, I mean,
hilarious.
I mean, Enterprise was just the first of the nuclear carriers, but then they went, "Oh, Nimitz can just have that. All right, job done."
Yep, they weren't sure what they were going to need, so they played it safe.
And you know what? For once, this isn't actually my fault. I've not gone off to drag out of my own volition. You've been pressured into it, so I have immunity from consequences. Whoopee!
All right.
Anyway, so okay, that's a good question. Blue Ghost Flat Top Slayer asks, so the purpose of the Deutschland class... Oh, hang on. Oh, sorry, hang on. I'm going to actually make sure I actually read all the questions before...
Darth City's asked about 14-inch British capital ships.
Because they're the 13.5, and that was a Royal Ordnance gun, and it was close enough to make no difference to the 14. So...
They had an equivalent, they didn't need it.
And to be fair, there were British 14-inch capital ships. The Almirante Latorre. She served during the First World War. Before she entered Chilean service.
Now then, Blue is Flat Top's question. The purpose of the Deutschland is to be able to fight anything they can't outrun and outrun anything they can't fight. So is it better to give it slightly smaller main armament?
It would have been better to go with 6 8-inch guns in 3 twin turrets and use the extra weight for more speed and a full belt that's immune to 8-inch shellfire along its entire length.
This is as much a propaganda instrument as it is anything else, and I'll be damned if we're putting small guns on our propaganda instrument.
And it's also worth pointing out that while they were aimed to fight Britain, it's worth pointing out that these were built by the Weimar Navy, which had no designs on ships like Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, or anything like that.
Yeah, that's true. So it's the biggest guns they're going to put on a boat.
And these were to be the biggest vessels of the Weimar Navy. Which there were to about 3 or 4.
Pretty much everything they could dare fight.
Which for the Weimar Navy was basically having enough of a threat to make the French scared, and having enough ships to basically tell the Russians to fuck off in extreme fashion in the Baltic.
Yep.
A10 Brainlet asks, this is a bit outside of my area, but I'll give it a crack. You're in charge of arms procurement for the Philippine military today, and you need to protect Philippine interest and from China. What do you do and why? I have no idea what the Philippines' budget is.
Nuclear ambiguity.
Indeed.
Moving on.
The Philippines don't even fucking... What? What?
Buy them from the Americans on the sly. Simple.
Pharaoh, I guess.
Just whenever anybody asks, you can neither confirm nor deny that you have nuclear weapons.
We may or may not have bought a couple of B-61s off the back of an American truck.
Okay.
Exactly. And if the Americans won't give it to you, the French will. They've got a history of doing it.
How long would it... X the 10th asks, how long would it take for carrier fleets to be up to the task of sinking battleships to be assembled? I assume this is in relation to the previous question about no war in the 40s. Enable ship to a fight reliably without the Yanks opening up the portal to the elemental plane of Essexes, even with more capable munitions going on planes. Basically, they will...
The logic of your question is somewhat flawed.
I'll let you
The number of
take
flat tops in a given strike group in the 40s, whether or not a given flat top can kill a given battleship comes down to whether or not that flat top's crews get lucky. They could be the best goddamn bomber crew in the world, and under combat conditions, they're probably still gonna miss. One for one, like theoretically at least, it would be entirely possible for a single carrier and a few escorts to single-handedly sink every battleship in the world. Unlikely, but possible. You always want more force than you need. That's the basic rules of force composition, right? You never want to meet the enemy barely.
You want to kill them as soon as you can.
With as much force as you can, as quickly as you can.
Yes.
So you want a lot of aircraft in the sky at one time, all dropping their ordnance at the same time on the same thing, and that just increases the likelihood that something somewhere will hit something important.
Yes. One of the other important notes is that having additional flat tops in a strike group means additional patrol aircraft, which means they're more likely to find whatever it is they're trying to blow up.
Because it's worth pointing out that even by the end of the Second World War, radar still wasn't to a point where you're looking at contacting the enemy through radar, unless it's an airstrike coming in. you're still having to loft aircraft to go and find the blokes.
Yep.
It
And
also
if you
means
look at, and that's a pivotal part of several battles during the war,
Like
is information about who's where, what they're doing, and misreports about who's where and what they're doing.
US subs were
Also means-
incredibly useful for this,
oh yeah,
especially in
certainly.
the late war.
I mean, it also means with just more flat tops means if your first strike doesn't work, you can get more aircraft back in the air again. You can cycle stuff out as well, so you can just have more different types of aircraft doing different jobs simultaneously. So you can keep a cap up. You can keep those reconnaissance aircraft looking for other things, as well as also sorting your strike packages, without just clogging up your decks with a bunch of different airframes of different types. It's just a mess if you only got one trying to do everything.
Basically, that's a very long and complicated way of saying that CV6 could have single-handedly won the war.
Where were we?
Anyway,
Okay, so do you think?
and that's both fronts, mind you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Darth Sidious, do you think 3 8.8-inch guns would work for the Deutschlands? They aren't big enough. You can fit 2 twins, so you can fit 2 twins roughly by just rejigging the hull a bit, where you could fit a single triple, like slightly stretch it around a bit, but not 3 triples, because that would be more weight than the two twin 11s, I think. Oh boy, Fleet's starting to see red. Frywind asks, what do you lot think about the monstrous French pre-dreadnoughts? You need to clarify!
Most of the man
You need
with
to
the French
fucking
flag
clarify!
and the outline of a French warship as his profile picture.
You need to
What he
fucking
thinks of
clarify!
I mean,
French pre-dreadnought.
And then you call them monstrous and weird within the same fucking bit!
Yep. I mean, admittedly, they're not inflexible, so I hate them, but we
Fuck you, Inflexible's worse than any of the French pre-dreadnoughts. Heck, she's worse than a lot of the French ironclads.
I mean, yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah, no, pre-dreads.
Ain't got shit on the USS Vesuvius.
Oh, take a running conk at yourself, you bloody yank.
But 2 foot thick armor plate.
French pre-dreadnoughts
Means something.
were arguably leaders in a lot of key aspects of ship construction. They were the first to go into steel. They were the first to switch to quick-firing large guns that could be loaded at any angle and any traverse or elevation angle of the turrets. They were the first to adopt steel armor in addition to steel construction, and they were the first to adopt what they thought was stable high explosive. Although Poudre B turned out to not be quite so stable, and resulted in the loss of a few French pre-dreadnoughts to catastrophic magazine explosions, just sitting in harbour. As for which one was the weirdest, none of them. They're all beautiful and perfect, and I love them. Apart from Brennus. Brennus is a fucking misstep, and she should have been bigger than she was, and she should have had 4 13.4-inch guns rather than 3, and I won't forgive them for not building her as a proper pre-dreadnought, which she should have been better than the Royal Sovereigns, but she wasn't. A10 Brainlet asks, is yes, Minister, and yes, Prime Minister, the prime of comedy? Yes, there is no argument
Yeah.
on that. We do not.
Sorry, we do not. Yeah. I mean, I've just been watching like a bunch of it today.
Marshall Rune asks, let's ask a different question. Was it more likely that World War II ended earlier than what happened in our timeline? Or was it more likely that it ended later? In regards to what? What's the divergence point for this? Like, you can't... Why?
I just thought I've missed something earlier. No, it just doesn't make sense. Okay.
Did submarines have a designated deck gun crew? Yes. In the sense that there would be sailors aboard who were qualified to operate that gun.
Because you have to remember that while submarines usually did gunnery at close range, you usually want, as a submersible gunner, you want to be landing hit after hit after hit after hit You don't want to be missing those rounds. You want to be putting round after round into your target, sink it, get away.
Now, as with most things on a submarine, you're probably not just a deck gun crewman. You've probably got at least 6 other things you do, because there's not enough people on this goddamn boat for everybody to only do 5 things. Come on now.
X10th asks, I was trying to ask more about when does it become reliable enough that a battleship is going to die impotently if it tries something that people give up on as the things as a primary capital ship. Because my thought is that the obsolescence of the battleship is predicated on the mid-late World War II assumption of existing in a world of ambient mass carrier aircraft. Basically, it's the fact that if you have a world where there's no Second World War, you have a world where the battleship has come out of the build holiday of the Washington Naval Treaty and is reintegrating itself, and the modern battleship is reintegrating itself into the fleet. Carriers are also increasing in size. But so are battleships. You've also got the rise of larger escorting destroyers and cruisers as well.
You never get anything like Tengo, right? Like, Tengo demonstrates conclusively and resoundingly the new status quo. The problem is that there's a lot of asterisks on Tengo.
Yeah, what you basically...
One of the chief ones being that Yamato might have gotten through.
One of the things about this hypothetical world is that you basically have a lot of, like, if there are any naval actions, you basically have the battleships will be with the carriers, there will be a carrier exchange, or maybe 1 or 2 carrier exchanges throughout the day, and then, as the carriers limp away with escorts, the battle lines will then close to decide the action.
Yep,
and that's probably what will happen. Like the carriers will try to decide the action themselves, and if they cannot do it, the battleships will close to do it themselves.
I would say that at what point does the battleship still stop being built?
I say late 50s, basically when anti-ship missiles come to the point where armor just is irrelevant.
Reliable guided anti-ship missiles that don't give a shit how many feet of steel you put in front of them.
Although at that point you probably see a transition to the large surface gun combatant, and like there will be a last gasp of the gun line, basically building things like Stalingrad, Alaska, or things like that.
Yep.
One last gasp at it, saying like, well, if we can't armor them, we'll make them fast and with, like, you know, nasty rapid-firing 12-inch guns, and we'll give them some anti-ship missiles. And then what you'll see is you'll see a gradual transition from... You'll gradually see in each successive version of these new large surface combatants, the guns get smaller and the missile tubes proliferate until you instead of just going snap from cruiser to missile cruiser, the
guns get smaller and the helipads get bigger.
Yeah, you basically see a gradual transition through all these various ship classes from the large gun surface combatant to the missile cruiser. But it's a gradual transition over multiple generations of ship, rather than a short, sharp snap.
You do ultimately still end up where you do Pyro.
Bull Reeves asks, if the 4 Japanese carriers at Midway were replaced with armored deck carriers like Taiho, do you think it's possible that some or all could have survived the American dive bombers and by extension the battle? We don't know we don't know how Taiho's deck would have stood up to US bombs, because she was sunk by 4 torpedoes from a US submarine. We've no idea how she would have held up to US 1,000-pound bombs or 500-pound bombs.
Aki and Delta have been answering this in the.
Oh, have they? Oh, have they?
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, I'll if they've got that. Fair enough. Where were we? Oh, no name. Okay, I think I understand what... Okay, so I think the question in regards to, Chair, the question that we were both confused about, No Name says he thinks it's something to do with, did the Allies or Axis get luckier with how long World War II lasted? The fact that the Allies were able to put down Germany and Japan by 1945 is honestly is impressive, and it's a tribute to the fact that it was the three most industrialized powers in the world, UK, USSR, and USA, working together, that they were put down that quickly.
Remember,
Yes.
there are major war plans being developed, not as hypotheticals at the end of the war, right? Like, it is expected that this is going to take longer, especially in the Pacific.
I'm also
The
going to...
Pacific certainly would have.
I'm also going to
could have
point...
lasted a lot longer.
Of course, let us not forget that the World War II in Europe could... What if Hitler hadn't committed to Operation Citadel? What if Army Group Center had retained that armoured... Well, what if Army Group Center hadn't been spent on Kursk and Citadel? That would have meant that there were a lot more reserve forces to commit to local counterattacks, holding the Russians back. The Eastern Front gets a lot more grindy.
The ultimate out... And that's saying something, because it's the fucking Eastern Front.
Mm-hmm.
Having Citadel not go ahead and having Hitler just commit to a defensive grind extends the Eastern Front by 6 months to a year. That's how much force they threw into Citadel that they could not afford to lose, and that they lost anyway.
Yeah, I think partially, but I'm not quite sure how it would affect the timeline for the West.
Oh no!
Much,
Oh no! No!
I think Desert in Italy is still going about the same.
Mushroom Cloud.
Oh yeah, no,
That's what
it's
it does.
Yeah,
yeah,
so,
but it's again like it's more, but like, no, it was more an example of how
yeah,
looked.
yeah, it could have been a lot longer.
So, the short answer to your question is that it's lucky for the Germans that they didn't get nuked.
Yeah, they were months from getting nuked. Because, yeah.
We had a nuclear monopoly, and by God, we were going to use it.
First question
Well-
is, and I suppose that's an interesting question, really. What would the German High Command's reaction to being attacked with a nuclear weapon really have been?
Oh, it's simple. Because it would have been on Berlin, removing a lot of the upper echelons of the German leadership.
I don't think it would have been on
It
Berlin,
wouldn't have been. We
No,
know it wouldn't have been.
because
They had
'cause
target. Berlin
it
is
is
not
target
on the target
Tokyo.
list. I
Because
don't
obviously
remember
Tokyo
what all
can go
is,
up.
but I know Berlin's not.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Uh,
because you do not want to nuke the High Command, because then there's nobody
Then
to
who can
negotiate
surrender?
with. Yeah, exactly. You-
That's not true.
Is it
The
not?
reason that Tokyo didn't get nuked was because one, it was much easier for the Americans to get the rest of the country of Japan to surrender, with the God Emperor of Japan surrendering to U.S. forces.
exactly.
With the Nazis, it's far easier to negotiate with whoever is left because the architects of the war are now dead in Berlin.
Basically, yeah.
Berlin would have been nuked.
It's basically the reverse for the two nations.
That's my bad then.
With
must have just-
with
Oh,
with,
well.
with Germany, you want to get rid of the people currently running the war. With Japan, you don't.
Well, not quite true. You want to get rid of the people actually running the thing. With a major asterisk.
Yeah.
We already got Dresden. Bomber Harris, do it again.
Blow it up again, just to be sure. I mean, what's the worst that happens?
X the 10th asks, does the American pre-dread era fondness for the 8-inch gun, even in superimposed turrets, and the 7-inch gun in lieu of the 6-inch gun on the Mississippi, make them the actual weirdest pre-dreadnoughts? The American fondness for the 8-inch gun on their pre-dreadnoughts, basically actually learned this recently, comes down to the fact that they had a 5-inch gun, and they had an 8-inch gun that were long-barreled and capable of quick firing, but they didn't have a 6 or a 7-inch gun that were modern enough for that.
It's also...
So they decided that if they were going to have secondaries, they may as well go with turreted 8-inch on their pre-dreads, because at least that way they've got something that can reach out and provide support. Remember,
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but part of the reason 8-inch guns are preferable is because that's one of the largest shells that can be reliably manhandled.
one of, but these were turreted 8-inch.
Yeah. Because I know, well, that's why the 155 and the 152 have stuck around for so long as part of why they've stuck around for so long as artillery bases on land. They're the biggest things that you can still practically manhandle ammunition for.
Yeah. You don't. You don't see you see the 8-inch on American warships disappear when their modern 6-inch appears, and then you see it return again when the semi-dreadnought era rolls around. What's the effect of HE shells on battleships? Depends where they land. But if it's on the belt armor, it's a lot of blast, but not much else. If it's on the superstructure, might have problems.
Yep. Could start a fire, could blow something important to pieces. Like, that much explosive in something that isn't designed to take that much explosive is never a good thing. It's just a question of how big of a bad thing it is.
Yeah.
Right? Because, it might blow away the secondary officer's mess, in which case, oh, boo-hoo, horrendous. Or it might blow away the primary fire control system.
The radars
It's
come off.
unlikely to, yeah, the radars come off. That's you need that.
Mm.
That's immediately important to the fighting to continued combat efficacy. The secondary officer's mess.
Not so much.
I mean, I'm sure that second lieutenant's really gonna miss it, but
Rune. Okay, I'll read the question verbatim because obviously I've got the YouTube stream going as well, so they can't see the question, so just give me a second.
Yeah, fair enough.
Marshall Rune asked if an 800mm Gustav railway gun nailed a HE shell on the deck of USS Iowa, how much damage would it do? I hate to break it to you, but the Gustav fired armor-piercing HE shells. The whole point of her rounds were to penetrate multiple centimeters of concrete, heck, meters of concrete, and then explode. If she lands a hit on the deck of USS Iowa, that shell is going through the deck, through the ship, and out the bottom before it explodes. It'll do it for its X. Heck, it'll go through the bottom, and then it'll keep going for another 500 meters and do virtually no damage. That's the sheer power of the shell. The problem with Gustav was her accuracy. She was an extremely inaccurate gun. Had really bad.
You're lofting such a huge shell
really
at relatively low velocities.
Yeah, she had really bad barrel droop, and she had a barrel life that was abysmal. She fired, I think, 3 accurate rounds in her entire bloody career, and a lot of the targets that they say she hit are disputed to this day. Well, the reason to build a gun that big was a fairly simple one. The Germans wanted a weapon that could just repeat what the Big Berthas had done.
thank you, Sea Otters. I'm glad somebody else was thinking that.
Funny. You lads are fucking hilarious, you know that?
What's Sea Dollars done?
Bad barrel droop, there's pills for that. Hilarious, that man.
Oh.
Someone... Fish react that man! Fish react him! Fish react him! Where's my fish reaction? Fish react him! Fish react that man! Oh god! Oh god, there he goes! But, yeah. The reason why they built it was basically to smash through the...
Overcompensation!
No, to smash through the Maginot Line, basically. The whole idea was that it would fire on... It would fire like... It would be targeted in, they'd fire 1 round as a ranging shot, then 2 rounds to destroy whatever target they were firing at, then the barrel would be cleaned, maintained, and go again. They didn't
and they would be firing on very, very large targets.
Yeah, they didn't do that at Sevastopol, because this was basically them just, we've got it, we'll use it. So they were actually not firing it the way it was supposed to be fired.
Seems a bit expensive for the job at hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, it is a lot of just compensating for.
Yeah. When actually
lack of
you could,
testicles.
when honestly enough, you get better accuracy and more range from a fucking V2 with a bigger explosive warhead.
And that's saying something.
Yeah. Just drop a tall boy on it. Simple. Problem solved.
The tall boys were some impressive fucking shit, man. And the fact that they were able to drop them so accurately by the end of the war.
Someone's been reading the Red Fleet timeline.
No, that's just something I knew off the top of my head.
No, Bull Reeves. Bull Reeves has been clearly reading the Red Fleet timeline.
The
Okay.
1980 Nagato. Ugh.
Wedged.
Oh Jesus.
Wedge asks, okay, V2 smacks into an Iowa then. That is a nasty, nasty experience for the Iowa because that is well, what's the V2's warhead is something ridiculous considering the size of the bloody thing. It's
And remember, it's
fairly
and the
punchy.
thing's got a significant amount of kinetic energy too.
Where is it? What's the warhead?
And
A
remember,
1-ton
battleships
warhead.
aren't-
She's carrying 1,000 kilograms, and this thing is
Yeah.
smacking in. And the thing is, it'll work better because it's not an armor-piercing warhead. The sheer momentum will carry the explosive some way into the deck before the V2 explodes.
or while it's in the process of exploding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And-
that's going to be a nasty experience for the Iowa.
Remember, battleships aren't designed to take hits from directly above.
Oh, you know,
At least-
yeah. Well, not from a ballistic missile flying at Mac Jesus, carrying a 1-ton warhead.
Just drop a tall boy on it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's how you deal with battleships. Drop tall boys on them.
Exactly. It works great.
It'll just to sort it out. It'll definitely be a mission kill, if not an outright destruction. Like she's going home. Like I was going home.
Yeah, like you've just got a dirty, great big hole in the deck wherever that's landed. You know, you're probably crippling a turret at least.
Give Iowa
was
the
going-
true surface
was-
experience. Oh, fucking! Oh god, this is great. This is a great rambling. It's having a whale of a time tonight. This is the best one for a few weeks.
Let's see. Yeah, no, it's not going to go well.
The Iowa would have a significant emotional event.
Very significant.
Yep, you're not wrong there, mate.
All right, come on. We're having some good questions here. I'm noticing a lot of new people in the chat asking questions. Keep it up. I know it's a lot of new people this time. Very nice. You'll love to see it.
Answers are guaranteed. Good answers are not.
Exactly. We try our best to
That-
answer all
yeah.
questions. Oh, did we get? Have I skipped any? Apologies if I've skipped questions. I'm trying to keep up. Please do feel free to drop a reply to that question if I've missed it. Do any of you play DCS? I know DCS is popular with some members of the Admiralty, but not me. Well, wait, I'm not a member of the
am not
Admiralty
one of
anymore.
them.
What's the DCS? No, I haven't played
Yeah.
it either.
The Colt Monitor is a fucking banger. I want one.
No Name Sport asks, so I know Drac likes to go on about luck vampires like Prince Eugen, Yukikaze, or maybe Shigure, but now I'm curious, would there be a good allied ship candidate for a luck vampire? Or maybe a World War I luck vampire? It's Warspite! It's Warspite and Enterprise!
Yep.
It's
The
Warspite!
two ships that are, yeah, you know, it's just the way it works, right?
It's both of them, it's Warspite and Enterprise!
What? Hang on. What's a look vamp? Hang on.
A ship that steals all the luck from the other ships around it.
Oh, a luck vampire. I see. Right. Now I get that. Yes. That's fair enough.
Just
That,
think of the poor Yorktown.
Like Hornet and
Poor
Hornet and
Yorktown.
Yorktown get splattered, like while all the QEs
Yorktown
survive World War.
has like 2 different miraculous recoveries, and then still doesn't live to see the war's end. Yorktown was a pretty lucky ship until it wasn't.
Whereas Enterprise just kept taking hit after hit and going, I didn't hear no fucking bell! Oh, that's great. You'll love to see it. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, Tiger and Renown did steal some British battlecruiser luck, that can be said. But Tiger was scrapped in the 30s. No, Warspite lost a good number of her sisters during the war. Barham took a pasting, and one other QE got nastied, I believe.
Let's see. The Ace technical specs and flying prototypes for the A6 Invader back to 1942.
Where's this?
Okay.
Where's this?
Right about 6 messages below the Luck Vampires one. Maybe 10 messages.
Oh, so we
We've
missed that
already
one.
answered this.
Oh, did you? My bad.
Okay. Who was more lucky, Seydlitz or Prince Eugen? If you're talking about the cruisers, Prince Eugen, because Seydlitz was never completed. Why they chose to convert her into a carrier, I will never know. Aggressively silly. Prince Eugen at least had a chance to do some war service. And of course she became USS Prince Eugen, which is hilarious. And I will never stop saying it.
It is hilarious. I love it. And then we nuked it.
To see what would happen. Oh, World War One Seydlitz and World War Two Prince Eugen. Prince Eugen, because she had a better run of it, never properly seriously damaged, whereas Seydlitz, while she did survive, got really quite badly battered. Whereas Prince Eugen sailed through the war going, I'm the only German capital ship that's having a good time and not being destroyed all the time. One of the best naval games in my opinion, in no particular order. Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, Rule the Waves 3, Rule the Waves 2, War at the Sea, Silent Hunter 4 and Silent Hunter 3. Let me think, any others that I've missed? I mean, there's OG Rule the Waves, which is also very good, but that's quite old by this point. If I wanted
Carrier Command.
If I... yeah, is that really a naval game? I mean...
Carrier Command 2.
Kind of.
It's an aircraft carrier. It does aircraft carrying things.
I mean... Hoi 4 Naval? No. Hoi 4 Naval has to be modded out the wazoo.
How does a Western Front victory for the Allies look if the Soviet Union has only pushed into Poland and hasn't gotten into Germany proper yet? That just means the Western Front's got to go further.
Which
Yeah,
means,
they gotta go to
which
Berlin.
means, well, if they, if they're stopped in Poland, the Western Allies are going to have a real vested interest to get to Poland to put the Polish government in exile in Britain back in some form of power.
One toe in Poland, and all of the London Poles are like,
Yep, we're going,
Crap.
we're going.
we're going, boys. Yeah.
Fighting,
But sir, it's not safe. We're going.
I've heard about Fighting Steel, but I've never actually played it. The Western Allies have very little steam to actually push into Germany past the sea. They did, though.
But they did, though. They went round it, sort of.
Kind of, a little bit.
A bit, you know.
Across the Rhine.
Yeah, they got across the Rhine, they're like that.
Well, if the... Actually, considering how long X10th asks, considering how long it took Japan to have the Taiho fuel air explosion, how lucky was it the US had things go exactly wrong for Lexington in the first big carrier battle, in a way that gave them the heads up about purging fuel lines for Yorktown and Hornets take up all the Japanese attention during 2 battles? I honestly have no idea. I am not sure of the exact specifics of Lexington's loss. I know the rough, very, very rough statistics, but I don't know the exact specifics of it. This is why they call me Discount Drac. Not that.
Very difficult to say that any loss is lucky, even if you can learn valuable damage control information from it.
That is a very expensive piece of equipment.
With a lot of people on board.
Like,
and
crews are ultimately the most expensive part of any vessel.
I would say what you ideally want to have happen in a situation like that is for there to almost be a catastrophic loss. Obviously, it's very difficult to put your finger on that, right? Like, look at what the Navy learns from Forrestal. That could have gone way, way, way worse.
Oh god, Forrestal was just a... That was nasty.
Yes, and it could have been way worse. It could also have been way better. Like, there were heads rolled, and
It
they
was
should have.
absolutely not a net positive for the US fleet that Lexington had that tragedy.
Correct.
Lexington is not an old ship. She's only 20 years old by that point. In fact, hell, less than that, actually. She's not an old vessel by that point. Marshall Roon asks, in the height of World War II, the biggest capital ship in each navy gained the ability to fly... Oh, for the love of
Okay,
Christ, I
well,
can
see,
where this is
biggest
going.
capital ship is an interesting statement.
This information is delivered straight into the brains of Navy High Command through divine intervention, and considering ships aren't really armoured from below, I would assume putting it into combat wouldn't be a good idea.
Oh, no, putting it in combat would be a great idea.
You just sit off at range and laugh hysterically as you blow things
Just
up.
flip it upside down.
Yeah, because
Like,
ultimately it's very difficult to shoot straight up.
And
That's the
also,
thing.
large caliber naval guns aren't designed to hit things that high. And also, if you're firing rifle caliber ammunition, or, God forbid, anti-aircraft guns at the bottom of a capital ship, first off, that capital ship's likely going to be several miles up and tens of miles distant. So, yeah. Good luck actually
What would
get
that be? Like, which
How do
ships?
How do you...
This is what? Mid-42?
No, 41.
Okay, so what
I-
if we got flying? We're gonna say the single
Lexington's...
largest
so that'll
by
be...
tonnage.
Flying,
So
Rodney,
that's-
flying, Rodney, flying, Rodney.
Yeah, so that'd be Lexington, Nelson or Rodney, Bismarck, one of the Littorios, one of the Ganguts for Russia, it would be Nagato for Japan, I think, or possibly one of their carriers, because Yamato's not finished yet.
It might Yamato, even though it's not done, might already be bigger.
Yeah, but she's not in commission though, so that's sort of...
It didn't specify in commission. It just said biggest ship.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, honestly, if you've got flying aircraft carriers, you can just launch bombing raids on any target you like.
Exactly. I was gonna
yeah,
say
because
only
just-
one
just
of those
slap-
is a flat
just-
top, so I
yeah,
think I know who wins.
No, and the thing is, you can slap fully loaded B-25s on the deck because they just go off and then dive and then
oh yeah,
pull
they
out.
just sort of fall off.
Yeah.
Don't matter. Doesn't matter. You don't. It doesn't matter what you launch. It'll launch. It'll gain enough airspeed.
Oh, hello.
Down.
Hi, Drac.
Somebody's gonna have a. Imagine being the poor bastard that's got to be in the first B-17 that goes off the edge of the
It's
thing.
too wide. You can't
Oh.
use it.
No,
Watch
because
me.
you can park it on the very
Fucking
end
watch
of the
me.
deck, so there's nothing in the way, and you just push it off at like 3 miles an hour, and it just drops like a stone until it gets enough airspeed to pull up again.
You boys.
How
are
What
would
are we
you
launching
have to
B-17s
be?
off of?
Well, basically, someone asked
A
what
flying
happens.
flat top.
Someone asked, what if magically the biggest ship in every navy in 1941 started flying, and we're just having fun with that.
Oh, right.
So,
Well, on the notion of B-17s and ships, you might be interested to know that I'm currently in the preliminary planning stages of a book on not just HMS Habakkuk, but all the weird and wonderful floating airfield concepts the Allies came up with in World War II.
Ooh.
It's going to take a while to do all the research, but I have come across a rather interesting extract, which is a conversation between Churchill and the US Navy and US Army Air Forces, which Churchill suggests that in order to accelerate the rate of transfer of heavy bombers across the Atlantic, which obviously were having to fly over Greenland and then via Iceland, he suggested, well, why don't we build one of these Habakkuk carriers as a transit point, and we can sail it to the ideal position in the mid-Atlantic for the B-17s and B-24s. The US Army Air Force turned around and said, well, that's all well and good, but you're talking about something with a 1,000-foot runway. We need a 6,000-foot runway to be on the safe side. Thinking clearly from the tone of the overall message that this would be the end of the matter, to which Churchill responded that given the progress of the design of the Habakkuk at that point in time, it would be possible to build a 6,000 foot long Habakkuk. It would just take an extra month. To which the US Air Force seems to have failed to respond entirely and just desperately pretended that nothing had been said.
Just an extra month.
Yeah, because at that point they were essentially they'd drawn up plans for Habakkuk, which was, here's the propulsion system at the back, here's something which we can vaguely potentially call a bow at the front, and everything in between was just going to be made up of mass-produced modular cells, at which point extending it was just a matter of build more modular cells.
Is that where we get the pods on the side rather than the engines at the back? Because at that point you need...
Yeah, well, the whole thing by this, because remember this is in the latter part of the war, but by this point the designs for Habakkuk had actually gotten remarkably well refined. They didn't end up doing it, of course, but it's an interesting one.
Right.
Habakkuk
Are we all
is
going to crowdfund our own Habakkuk?
That sounds like an excellent plan.
Where are we going to get the money for that? I'm not made of money, you know.
Slight problem. Are we sure it won't melt?
Pikecrete doesn't melt. Well, it does, but not easily.
Well, that's a separate matter. I mean, there's an awful lot of additional documentation that hasn't been seen before, mostly because there's a whole tranche of Habakkuk documents which weren't filed under HMS Habakkuk.
What were they filed under?
Project Tentacle, which was the subsequent one of the major subsequent floating airfield operations, but kind of absorbed, for whatever reason in the filing system, it absorbed a good chunk of the latter Habakkuk documentation.
What twit named it Project Tentacle?
Churchill.
Oh, God damn it, Churchill, stop.
Makes sense.
Stop.
Makes sense.
There's actually a note where he specifically says, I wish to name it Tentacle. Can somebody please check if we haven't used a tentacle already to name something else?
God damn it. Oh, dear.
Yeah, there's actually some very complex insulation plans for the Pike Creek carriers, which, let's just say there's a lot that hasn't been published about Habakkuk and about its sort of subsequent stepchildren, which is why I've kind of taken it on board. I'm hopefully going to be co-authoring it with a friend of mine who's based in the US and has easy access to NARA, so we're kind of tag teaming where I'm looking through the National Archives, and then where the National Archives refer to correspondence with the USAAF or the USN that isn't in the National Archives, I can then ping back to him and say, look, here's the dates and times and who was involved in the correspondence, and then he can go to NARA and check for NARA's plans, and then when their records say, oh, and we spoke with the British about this, then it's back to Q for me to put it all together.
Good God.
And who knows what you're gonna find?
Yeah.
Oh, it's fun. Yeah, there's discussion in mid to late 1945 about plans for the invasion of Japan, assuming that the nukes don't work out, where there's suggestions of building multiple 3,000 to 5,000 foot floating runways in the vicinity of Japan to essentially allow a good chunk of the land-based Allied air forces to be within operational striking distance of the Japanese mainland.
That might be needed, given some of the Japanese preparations for downfall.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of argument as to whether they should use them as forward operating bases for P-51s and so forth, or whether they should, kind of like the Habakkuk idea, use them to very rapidly establish a daisy chain across the Pacific to allow for rapid reinforcement of the carriers.
And of course, you've also got the
Well,
advantage
if you can
that
crank the things out in the volume they seem to think you can, why not both?
This is true.
it depends how quickly you can make Pikecrete.
Oh, these are of a slightly different. These are of a slightly different design, but again, that'll be a subsequent thing that we'll.
Let's not spoil the entire book, shall we?
No.
Get the boys from Frigidaire on it. We'll have a bazillion of them.
Yeah. All right, so All right. So, you all asked me to see if I could get Drac. Well, here you are. You happy now?
Well, you've got me till 7 because then at 7 I've got to go down and start cooking dinner.
Right.
But that means you've got me for an hour.
Of course, no name. You can ask the look vampire question again. Sorry, excuse me.
You're the one with the curse of the cough has transitioned over to.
Yes.
And Fleet died.
He's dead.
I live
with
again.
Fortunately, this set of antibiotics seems to be killing off the worst of my cough. So, with any luck, Wednesday or Thursday should be the first of my alternate history live stream Q&As. I need to
Fantastic.
catch up on about 3 or 4 of them.
I'll make sure I'm on standby for my usual MacGuffin, recording the super chats. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, you don't sell me off that easily, Caboose. I'm not. You don't. What? How can you do without discount Drac? I mean, I'm not actually Drac, but.
Poundland Drac.
Oh, for God's sake! That.
Yeah, I was gonna go. I was thinking Woolworth's Drac and then Wilkinson's Drac, and then I realised they're both gone now.
Oh, they are, aren't they?
Yeah. What's left? B&M?
Yeah, they're still going. Poundland, of course.
Yeah. What happened to the 99p shop? Did they get bought by Poundland?
Did they become Poundland?
They were
No, they were
competing
like-
at one point.
Oh yeah, C.
yes,
Dodders is.
Cosy lives.
Oh yeah, C. Dodders is in Gibraltar with the RN right now.
Oh, fun!
Oh, very nice.
He's got a picture of the 9.2 inch. That's much better than the ones I got while I was there. Because when I got there, they were in the middle of the Levantier clouds. Like, how the hell did you get that aerial one?
RN magic, access of the ship's
Probably
drones.
sent a helicopter up, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're immensely paranoid and against the use of drones in pretty much all of Gibraltar.
Oh.
Oh. Well, it is an active RN naval base, so.
It's just very small and concentrated. When I was there, they basically have 3 areas that you can fly drones, and they're all just little stretches over the sea. You're not allowed to fly them over land at all, with the exception of takeoff and landing, which has to be right on the edge of the sea. And the drone that I used, I got some rather nice aerial shots of the 100-ton gun that's the twin of the one in Malta, before I then had to do a combat evasion duck and roll to evade the large nest of seagulls who live on the ledge beneath the gun mounting, who took objection to the drone. Yeah. You haven't known stress until you have your phone wedged up against your ear, trying desperately to explain to the Gibraltar police department that yes, in fact, you are the drone owner who just buzzed the bridge of an incoming tanker, and no, that wasn't deliberate. You are trying to not have your drone murdered by a bunch of herring gulls several times larger than the drone, and could they please leave you alone to get the drone back again so that you can stop bothering the shipping traffic before you cause an international incident by crossing over into the Spanish half of the harbour.
As you do when you're making
I
naval
swear, every
history.
time you go
Yeah.
somewhere, Drax, something
Videos.
happens.
And considering it's Gibraltar, the police station is literally like 600 yards up the road. So,
Well, at least nothing happened at Portsmouth in earlier this month, thank goodness.
yeah.
That was a good day. That was a very good day.
Hmm.
Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, we have 2 specific questions that people wanted to put to you before you got here. One was about luck vampires, e.g., the ships you've mentioned that were luck vampires on the Axis side. Which ones do you think were luck vampires on the Allies side? We literally all jumped to Enterprise and Warspite.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, Warspite kind of got through with its on its own merits because, Barham was unlucky getting hit by a bunch of torpedoes. Valiant fell off a dry dock when it collapsed, which also didn't help. Malaya ended up having holes punched into it by slightly overactive highball tests. But Queen Elizabeth made it out okay, and to be perfectly fair, Malaya made it into retirement. And Valiant made it almost to the end of the war. Yeah, I think Wedge just got a point. Eskimo is probably one of the better ones, considering there were extremely few Royal Navy tribal class standing by the end of the war, and one of the ones that did was the one that was on its third bow.
Third bow.
Yes. It lost the first one being blown off at Narvik, and then it lost a second one being hit by ramming HMS Javelin.
That all right, sure. You know what? Bow replacement. Make the shipyard's day. Why not? Sure. 10 out of 10. Bow replace again.
I mean, Javelin to a certain degree is probably a close contender. I mean, the J class did suffer some quite horrific casualties. Most of the large Royal Navy destroyers built immediately before the war did, because they were big and capable and thrown into the worst of the theatres. And Javelin, you know, if you think Eskimo losing her bow twice is bad, Javelin was hit by 2 torpedoes and had her bow and stern blown off. Only her amidships third was left afloat, but they managed to tow her back in and fix her.
That's okay.
Front fell off.
That's
And back fell off.
Well, yeah, that's not supposed to happen, don't you know?
Yes.
That sounds more like the middle fell off and stayed where it was.
You know it does, doesn't it? Now that I think about it.
We've lost the bow and we've lost the bow and stern. Situation excellent. I shall attack.
I mean, I wouldn't count Marblehead. Marblehead was a very lucky ship, but to be honest, none of the Omaha class were destroyed in the war.
Really? They all survived?
Yeah. Well, because in large part, to be honest, because they were so old that outside of the very, very start of the war, they were pretty much almost entirely on second line duties. So,
Or being loaned.
I mean, Richmond
to the Soviets, which is
Richmond was present at the Battle of the Komandorsky Islands with Salt Lake City, but very wisely chose to not get shot at by Japanese heavy cruisers.
I didn't realize they had a choice in the matter.
Yeah, that's a.
It chose not to be by dint of the being told we're going to run away from the heavy cruisers, and Richmond adopted the strategy of I don't have to be faster than the Japanese, I just have to be faster than everyone else.
Smart.
They could still make 35 knots, couldn't they? By the Second World War.
If their machinery was in good condition, but as far as Richmond was concerned, as long as it was faster than Salt Lake City, that's all that really mattered.
Sorry, you're on your own. Goodbye.
Yeah, and I mean, it pretty much worked out, because even if Salt Lake City had been sunk, the Japanese expended so much ammunition going after her that even if they'd eventually overhauled Richmond, the chances of them actually scoring enough hits to put her down before they flat out ran out of 8-inch shells would have been pretty minimal.
Wedged asked, would Titanic have survived the iceberg if she did not attempt to turn, but instead just put herself into emergency reverse? Yeah, most certainly. Head-on collision, bows designed to take that sort of hit. Well, not designed to, but better able to than otherwise. And you end up with one or two compartments being flooded?
She potentially may have still sunk. It depends on how far back the shock damage goes. But even if she did, it would take a lot longer. I think it would basically be a case of, could she stay afloat, substantially afloat, long enough for Carpathia to reach her? That would dictate whether or not most of the people aboard survived.
If she is still afloat at that point, would Carpathia take her under tow?
I think Carpathia is probably a little too small, and Carpathia would also at that point be very overloaded with, a couple of thousand unexpected passengers.
True. Are there any naval ships of USN or RN that are in the nearby vicinity that can get there in like a day or two to see what Titanic's shape is, or if she's still there?
Not close enough. Carpathia could help with pumping, certainly, which might stem the flow, but you probably have to wait for the Californian to show up. So it would be a case of, could either Titanic's pumps alone, or possibly in conjunction with Carpathia's pumps, keep her afloat long enough for Californian to show up. Because if Californian shows up, then her own pumping capacity plus the ability to actually take the ship in tow at that point.
I assume she should be
Probably won't save
towed
her.
from the stern, obviously, to try and alleviate the water coming in through the front.
Yes, yeah. It would just be a case of, say, how far and how quick the flooding spreads and how much the damage control crew are able to do.
I mean, we do actually have
to be
some
honest,
basis for this in the sheer amount of times that Olympic hit stuff head on and survived.
yeah, I mean, to be honest, one of the best case scenarios, I guess, for Titanic would be for her to pull an Eskimo and slam the iceberg hard enough that the bit of the bow that gets crumpled up actually just collapses and falls away. Because it'll take a few dozen, maybe a couple of hundred people with it. But if the dead weight goes away and she's dead in the water, it's not going to substantially increase the water pressure on her bulkheads, but it is going to remove a huge amount of potential dead weight that we're dragging her down forward.
It's true. Darth Sidious asks, how does Scharnhorst compare to some of the 1934 12-inch designs before Second London collapsed?
Considerably better.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The
problem is that Scharnhorst is a little bit over 30,000 tons, whereas the 12-inch designs are all considerably smaller than that, almost entirely smaller than that, and they're also aiming for. They're also trying to be completely comprehensive, all-round designs, which really cripples them because it turns out you can't make a ship that's 7,000 to 10,000 tons lighter than a 35,000-ton ship armed with 16-inch guns and have it in any way, shape, or form capable of resisting the larger vessels. I mean, firepower-wise and armor-wise, some of the better 12-inch designs might have been able to go toe-to-toe with Scharnhorst, but they would be lacking in speed. So Scharnhorst could dictate the terms of the engagement.
Or just choose not to. Which is
Yeah,
also
well,
very distinctly likely.
Yeah. I'm just going to pull out my Friedmans and hopefully find the section that's got those particular stats in there.
Is this about Ranger by any chance? Oh no.
No, this is the 12-inch.
Oh, I see. Ramblings went. That's so true, CQ. Ramblings went drag.
That's Vanguard and Lion. That's a little bit too far.
While Drax's doing that, I'll just very quickly do a little tangent on Olympic and the time she sank a U-boat by quite literally ramming it, and then to add insult to injury, as she passed over the sinking submarine, chopping it to pieces with her 3 shafts. Just casually wields propellers as axe blades. That never gets old. Alright, some quick rapid-fire questions while Drax's doing that. Would you need Grand Sam to slink a Habakkuk? Possibly.
Hair dryer.
Was Titanic
Hair dryer.
hair dryer?
Hair dryer.
What?
You said sink a Habakkuk.
Oh,
Hairdryer.
I see nothing wrong with this plan.
It's an absolutely genius idea.
A crocodile on an LST. I don't
Yeah,
know.
here you go. So, for example, for a 12-inch armed vessel, and this is the critical thing that's really crippling them, with armor to protect itself against the 15 and 16 and 14-inch armed legacy ships. A 12-inch gunship at 27,000 tons would only be capable of 25 knots. You could get a 25,000-ton 12-inch ship, but if you wanted decent armor on it, you were not going to get past 23 knots. If I grab put that back, grab Friedman's, I can let you know what the US designs were like for that. Standard. I have to go to treaty, reconstruct, and boring designs to do. There we go. I must say, I absolutely love the fact that Norman Friedman puts almost all the ship designs he comes across in tables.
Well, that's nice.
They may be scattered somewhere completely irrelevant to the rest of what he's talking about, but they are helpful. So that's right. So there you go. So US 12-inch designs, 12 12-inch guns, 16 5.3-inch dual-purpose guns, 23 knots. With a 3.7
5.3-inch guns.
Yeah, it was a hypothetical dual purpose they were looking at in the late 20s and early 30s. Or you can have 8 12-inch guns with 12 5.3s for 25,000 tons, and you get 21 knots with 4 inches of deck armor.
This just seems like a bad idea all round.
Well, it's because they're having to design them with as I said before, with armor protection that can vaguely stand up to much heavier guns.
At that point, then, why not use the full 35,000-ton displacement limit to get 30 knots out of it?
This is when they were discussing dropping the gun caliber and displacement.
Oh God!
In London for the London Treaty. So here we go. Right. So US designs 12-inch guns, 12-inch inclined belt. So essentially US fast battleship style belt armor, 30,000 tons. What else have we got? 8 12-inch guns on 25,000 tons, again with a 12-inch belt. 12 12-inch guns on 34,000 tons will net you a 13.5-inch belt. But yeah, you're not going very fast at that point. Yeah, you're talking 21, 22 knots.
On a good day with the following wind.
Yeah, there's a 32,500 ton design with 9 12-inch guns that can do 25 knots, but that only has a 9-inch belt.
Ooh. At that point, I mean, I know it's older steel, but Almirante La Torre sitting in Chile has more belt armor than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically the problem is if you with those legacy designs, or well, with the designs to fight legacy battleships, yeah, they've got probably actually substantially better armor protection than Scharnhorst because they've got armor that's designed to stand up to 16-inch gunfire, but they're so much slower than Scharnhorst. Scharnhorst can just wander around going, yeah, whatever, I'll do what I like and toodle off.
Let me see.
That would have been exactly the phrasing used, of course.
Completely, totally. How much improvement could have been made to Ranger while maintaining the tonnage restrictions on her? I mean, you can't really improve Ranger without radically redesigning her. They've pretty much squeezed every inch of capability out of that ship as possible.
Well, I mean, it depends how you define improve. There are things you can do to her, but the whole point of Ranger was to try and get an active air group of roughly the same size as their existing fleet carriers. So at that point, that's Saratoga and Lexington on the absolute minimum possible hull. So yes, you can put in anti-torpedo defenses. You can put in larger power plant. You can put in armor of any description whatsoever, of any meaningful description.
I cast splinter protection.
Yeah, but anything you do at that point is going to start making very dramatic, very rapid inroads on your air group,
Yeah.
which, yeah, you'd end up with something that's a little bit more survivable, but it's probably only going to have an air group of about 40 to 50 aircraft, which is, and that's by, 1920s aircraft. If we're talking by World War II, you're probably down to about 30. At
And
which
that's
point you've made a
only
slightly oversized, if somewhat more durable escort carrier.
at that point you've only got fighters and dive bombers.
Yes, because of course Ranger, in the initial part of her service, didn't have any torpedo magazines.
Who needs torpedoes?
Darth Sidious, I've answered this question before, but to very quickly repeat myself with Drac being here, so he can correct me if he likes. The two improved Bayerns were just the Bayerns, just with slight revisions to their power plant and armor scheme. I think.
Saxon and Württemberg, yeah. I mean, they would have had, some wartime lessons improved, so maybe a slightly larger anti-aircraft battery and, more advanced fire control systems.
But you're not talking about
not
things
by
that
a huge amount.
like it's not enough to call them a separate class of ship.
Not really.
Well,
Well, I mean, that gets into that whole thing I discussed on a dry dock a few weeks ago
yes, I remember that actually.
about where do you draw the line with the new class or subclass, because some ships have been defined as subclasses on far flimsier bases than other ships which have been grouped into single classes. I mean, arguably the Hippers are made up of 3 distinct subclasses, but everyone just calls them the Hipper class. Whereas you compare, I don't know, even like a Cleveland and I think it's the Fargo is the subclass. And there's actually substantially less differences between those two than there is between, say, Hipper and Seydlitz. And that's before they turn Seydlitz into a carrier.
Why they chose to do that is beyond me. Like, you have a Hipper. It's not the best heavy cruiser in the world, but it's still a 8-inch cruiser, one of only 5 you're building. And it's getting towards the point
And you just
where...
sold Lutzow to the Russians. Don't forget that.
Which, again, why were they selling ships to the people they were actively going to fight?
Because they didn't know they were going to fight them at the time. That was an immediate pre-war sale for lots of nice money.
And then, of course, you've got the horrible thing.
I
where
mean, to be honest,
Sorry, go on.
Seydlitz is a bit of a horror story because she was 98% complete. She needed about 2 weeks of work to be made fully operational.
You're kidding. I thought
When
it
they
was less than
decided
that.
actually, they decided we're turning her back into, well, not back, into a carrier, and basically stripped her down, got down to the main deck level, and then ran out of puff and went, well, now we've got a Hulk.
Oh my god. My god.
And that was that.
That hurts me. That actually hurts.
Yeah. That was basically, it was all part of the big rush in. It was triggered by 2 things, and surprisingly enough, Seydlitz is actually on the list of 5-minute guides in the next couple of months. Yeah, it was triggered by 2 things. Firstly, the fact that Bismarck essentially the beginning of her downfall was being hit by carrier aircraft. So they were, we should have aircraft carrier to protect our capital ships, if nothing else.
You're building
And
Graf
then-
Zeppelin. You're building Graf Zeppelin. Just finish her.
Yes, well, finishing Graf Zeppelin was part of the strategy, but they decided they needed more than one. And so that's where you get a lot of this, people go on about the Europa conversion and a couple of other liners. They slated for conversions, but they decided that whilst they could make carriers out of those liners, they wouldn't be particularly good carriers. And so they decided, mostly on like speed grounds, so they decided, well, we need another large, fast hull that we can convert into a carrier, and Seydlitz was basically the only thing that fit that definition. Plus, of course, being a military-built ship with the degree of anti-torpedo defenses, she might last more than 5 seconds if she was actually attacked.
I mean, I get that. This is
Yeah.
all this is all well and good, but you have a cruiser that's 2 weeks away from commissioning. Pick anything else.
They don't have anything else. That's the point. The only other hulls in that kind of size and shape range are Blucher and Hipper, which sorry, not Blucher, Prince Eugen and Hipper, which are both actually complete. They literally have nothing else going at that point for them. And the secondary effect, because I mean, Bismarck starts everyone going, maybe we need carriers, and then the follow up is the hilarious Benny Hill chase of Tirpitz by Victorious's albacores.
Oh yeah, that one. Get back here! Come back here! If we weren't so slow, we'd have you, Bismarck, by now. Come
Yeah.
back here, you coward!
So yeah, at that point, they realised that even in the Arctic, there was a risk of,
Getting
this was
aircraft
the thing.
carried.
Yeah, when they started seeing random biplane fleet air arm torpedo bombers appear in virtually every environment on the horizon, they started to get a little paranoid.
Understandably.
I've answered this question before, but I'll answer it again. Chaos Runner asks, would Graf Zeppelin have been useful? Oh, completely. Very useful. Well, first off, it gives the German Navy a carrier. And if we're and I'm going to be reasonable here and say they use the things that came before the Bf-190s, the biplane fighters they came up with, and the biplane bombers for her instead of the Bf-190s and Ju-87s, because it makes more sense. But even so, that still gives the Kriegsmarine a carrier, and honestly, given the and assuming that she's finished, let's say, late 42, let's assume she's finished after Tirpitz and she's deployed to Norway with Scharnhorst and Eisenhower and everything else. That gives the Kriegsmarine actual air cover, and more importantly, it gives them the ability to scout without relying on the Luftwaffe for support.
Although, as I've said before, I personally would have, taken a bit of a left field approach and used Graf Zeppelin as an independent raiding ship.
I mean,
because she's actually faster, considerably faster than the capital ships, which means that if she needs to make her escape, as long as she's not in gun range when she begins sprinting, there's nothing that the Royal Navy has that's larger than a destroyer which can catch her,
and assuming,
unless they do
and
the absolute hilarity of bringing one of the Abdiel class mine layers out.
At which point, that if she
for
does
some-
get close enough, Graf Zeppelin has enough bang to deal with an Abdiel class mine layer.
Well, this is the thing. It's like she's fast enough to get away. She's got a useful range and transition speed. She's got the guns, as you mentioned. If she's dealing with a convoy, she has guns and armor. Far too much armor for an actual proper aircraft carrier. But if you're facing off against a convoy that's escorted by
A bunch
corvettes
of
and sloops and frigates,
or perhaps
with
one
four
very
4.7
destroyer.
inch guns,
Yeah, one destroyer leading it, perhaps.
yeah, you can use your aircraft to take out any of the escorts that look like they might be a particularly big threat, and then you can just go ham with your ridiculous numbers of 5.9 inch.
I mean, one of the good things about the Graf Zeppelins, I think, is that they had a very, very large magazine for their aircraft ordnance. Apparently.
Well, that wasn't very difficult considering they had so few aircraft. This is the one thing, the weakness of Graf Zeppelin, which basically makes her useless in an actual carrier fight, is that she's one of the largest aircraft carriers by displacement to go into the water prior to the Midway. And
But
she has an even more anemic air group than an illustrious class.
She has big displacement, but they use it badly for building a purpose-built carrier. But as a mixed raider carrier, she's
Yeah,
okay.
the fact that you've only got 3 dozen aircraft and you can't actually even launch all 3 dozen aircraft because they rely on catapult launches, and the catapult only has 24 charges before you need to reset the whole thing.
I think she was designed so that you could do rolling launch, but it required actually securing the catapult. So you either dedicate it to rolling launch or you dedicate it to catapult launch for that launch cycle.
She's got the flight deck length to do rolling launch for actually good carrier aircraft. The rolling launch, I actually looked this up when I was looking at Seydlitz to see if she was catapult or rolling launch capable. And it turns out the rolling takeoff distance for both the Ju-87 carrying a bomb load and the Bf-109K is considerably longer than even the flight deck length of Graf Zeppelin.
Oh.
They are terrible aircraft to turn into carrier-based.
This is why
aircraft.
I wanted the biplanes.
The Ju-8, I mean, the Ju-87 is if you compare it to a Kate or a Skewer, or in certain circumstances, the Dauntless is not a half bad dive dash torpedo bomber, but it's also incredibly difficult to actually get it into the air in the first place. Although it's easier, believe it or not, to get a Ju-87 into the skies than it is a Bf-109. Yeah, the only reason, I mean, to be honest, the only reason I say the Ju-87 has some advantages over the Dauntless is that, depending on the variant, the Ju-87 can carry a truly absurdly large bomb.
Yeah.
Because the Dauntless, as we know, typically carries 1,000-pounder. Later in the war, they carried slightly larger, but quite early into their deployment, Ju-87s proved capable of lofting 2,200-pounders.
Which is absurd.
I mean, you couldn't have a rear gunner, it limited your range massively, but you could haul them.
Yeah, God forbid, like, you have a convoy that's escorted by a heavy cruiser and a squadron of Ju-87s come out looking 2,000-kilogram bombs. Just like, hello, you're a heavy cruiser. We desire to make you not exist.
Although at that point their speed is so reduced that even the Fulmars had happy times shooting at them.
Yeah, but this time there won't be any Fulmars. Ha-ha!
I mean, a Ju-87 with a 2,200-pounder was what poked a hole in Illustrious's flight deck.
Good God. I mean, putting a Dornier 17 on the carrier? No, I mean, you can't, because that would...
The Flying Pencil has an even worse takeoff. I mean, even of the German medium bombers, the Flying Pencil has a terrible takeoff run. The HE-111 is too heavy, although it does have a very large wing for low airspeed handling.
Ju-88 won't work.
The weird thing is, of all the aircraft, the Ju-88 might actually work because the Ju-88 seems magically capable of almost anything.
I mean, to be fair, if you stripped all the armament off a Ju-88 except for perhaps a single torpedo or a single bomb, that might just get it off the deck.
Well, the Germans have already committed themselves to an entirely catapult-based flight operation paradigm. You might as well just catapult a Ju-88 and see what happens.
I mean, you could in theory do
it.
it.
Come back.
Provided that you somehow figure out a way to trigger both catapults at exactly the same time, you can just run the Ju-88 forwards and then just use both catapults at the same time.
Just get Jorg Sprava to travel back in time with an awful lot of Theraband rubber.
Or alternatively, oh god, Drac, I've had a horrible thought. You know those rocket pods the Germans used for the Me-323? Gigant. What if they made smaller versions of them for the carrier-based aircraft on Graf Zeppelin to enable them to take off without needing the cats?
I mean, it wouldn't be any less mad than some of the other stuff they came up with. It would probably rip a Bf-109's wings off.
Ha ha! I am now a rocket aircraft purely.
No. You have two rocket-powered wings and a very bemused-looking fuselage in the deck.
Oh, sod it. Carrier-based Me-163. Who cares if the carrier's exploding half the time? We have rocket aircraft. God.
German technical superiority.
Oh my god.
Would that... Okay, if you put the Comet on Graf Zeppelin, does that make it a missile cruiser?
Yeah.
Yes. A heavy aviation missile cruiser.
Roll a d6 to see if your aircraft explodes on the deck instead of heading skyward, but it would work. And in fact, considering the pint-sized nature of the 163, you could probably actually get a hilariously large air group of them.
What? man,
I
no,
would
even,
not want to see the damage control problem of the fuel.
even, I'll go one
Well, yeah,
better.
no.
I'll go one better.
Oh.
ME-163s for cap, and then we add 2v1 launch rails in place of the catapults for
That
strike.
was exactly what I was thinking. You're like,
And we have the world's first missile carrier.
Actually, I want to find out if the ME-163 has I'm pretty sure it does. But I want to find out if its thrust to weight ratio is actually greater than 1. Because if it is, you could technically just set them up on like rotating
Telephone
on
poles.
launch rails and go full hog with the missile version. And literally just fly them off left, right, and centre.
Who are we? Jerry Anderson? Because that's how the carriers did it in Thunderbirds.
I mean, you just turn into the wind and launch them off the rails, or launch them off of like fixed rails. You don't even need an arm.
I'm so glad this is recorded. No
And
one would
that
have
way
believed
you're
this
gonna get
happened.
a better
Bing.
launch characteristics than they would at sea. Because if you
I-
turn into a 15, 20 knot wind, your ship's going what 24 to 30 knots. Right there, that's 40, 50 knots of extra speed that a land-based one wouldn't have.
And the ME-163 was a good enough glider, so...
I mean, sadly, its thrust to weight ratio is actually only apparently 0.42, so you can't launch it vertically. But it's not going to, as Cyclic said, if you turn into the wind, you're not going to need a huge run up.
Oh, come on, we can't use the Natter, for God's sake.
I mean,
Mind
I
you-
wouldn't want to do this because the ME-163's effective ability to engage is problematic. It's not very good at anything other than, and even in this mission, it's not very good. Intercepting, twin or 4-engine medium to heavy bombers.
This is the right kind of silly. This is we're not taking this serious. This is the right kind of silly.
I mean, the right kind of silly for me is the one that sees the Axis attempt to fight longer and then get just battered even harder. But
I mean, the other thing that absolutely appeals to me with this idea is because of as Cyclic mentioned, the relatively short flight time of the 163. The Graf Zeppelin would need to get quite close to its targets to begin launching, which leads to this absolutely wonderful idea of Graf Zeppelin trying to attack a convoy, some heroic flower class just charging headlong, fires a single 4-inch shell which happens to hit just the wrong part of the ship, and
that's that volatile fuel off.
Yeah, imagine the explosion of Graf Zeppelin if she's carrying thousands of gallons of T-Stoff and J-Stoff combined with the magazines for all those 5.9-inch.
I would not want to be the flower class that fired that shot. That's a Victoria Cross to the crew.
Yeah, or like that Dutch freighter that had to ride up the tsunami from Krakatoa. In fact, at that point, if it's close range enough, Graf Zeppelin might actually take out more ships in death than she did in life. It would almost be like the Battle of the Nile, where everybody just stops to watch this colossal fireball go up into the sky.
I'm wondering
although
what the hell the Germans
although-
did this time.
Although, slight tangent, when it comes to the Battle of the Nile, I was highly amused when I was looking that up to find out that when Lorient exploded, the main reason that everyone else didn't horrifically burn to death was the explosion was so stupendously large. Everyone just watched all the major parts of the flaming debris sailing completely over the battle and land in the water behind them.
Bloody hell.
I mean, it damaged the side. Yeah, it damaged the sides of the ships, of some of the nearer ships, quite badly. But yeah, they were all panicking about large flaming chunks of French first rate coming down on them, and they're just like, "Oh, apparently they've landed half a mile over there. Never mind." She was carrying something like 40 to 50 tons of gunpowder.
Good lord. And that's a lot of bang for that period.
Yeah, there's a lot of bang even now.
Fair enough. That's... Where did we all start from this? Oh yeah, Graf Zeppelin as a raider. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, the first heavy aviation cruiser.
Funny.
Missile cruise.
That's.
I don't know. I think the Japanese came up with some better ones. Just saying.
Yeah, honestly, Issei and Hyuga are better aviation cruisers than Graf Zeppelin.
No, yeah, just
They're
for
not
reference,
cruisers. I was referring to the tones.
if you want to try and figure out the approximate detonation equivalent of Lorient blowing up, it's about the same as if you strap 10 Grand Slams together.
Christ.
Yeah, no, that is a big bang then. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, you could give Zeppelin the TA-154, but I don't know if it would work on the Cats. Too big. What would a tall boy do to a Yamato? Depends where it hits and how high it was dropped from.
I mean, if it hits,
amusingly nothing to a catastrophic elimination. Like,
I mean, Yamato is probably one of the worst possible ships to be hit by a tall boy for Yamato.
Because she's armoured enough to actually stop the bomb within the ship.
Yeah, the bomb will probably detonate somewhere inside the ship. Whereas, like, even with Tirpitz, at least one of them went straight through her and into the seabed. It was just the seabed was about 10 feet below her keel, so it didn't matter too much.
Mm.
I mean, it's kind of like the Fritz X. You know, the reason the Fritz X was not quite as lethal as it on paper should have been was because it punched holes clean through quite a lot of the ships it hit, including Warspite. And Roma was unfortunate enough to have just enough horizontal protection that the Fritz X fetched up next to a magazine before going off.
That's a point, interestingly. I'm not quite sure how this would work out, but Mo Waifu asked, what's the naval equivalent of strapping a big-ass turbo onto
I
a
can
Honda
tell
Civic?
you right now, there's two classes of ship actively in service.
Go on, then.
Actually, there's a couple of them, but I'm going to start with the two in service. And that is the Freedom and Independence class littoral combat ships. Now, moving down, you have the Pegasus class hydrofoils. The Soviets also had a gas turbine hydrofoil, just like the Pegasus.
Abdil-class mine layers?
They had... No, these were supposed to be anti-submarine ships for the Black Sea Fleet.
Ivan, strap big gas turbine to it.
These things could do like 45 or more knots. It was nuts. They only ever built one of them because they realized it was a bad idea.
You see, Ivan, submarine cannot torpedo you if you can outrun torpedo.
Well, the
That's
funny
just
part
philosophy
is the
behind the
torpedoes they were up against in the Turkish Navy at the time could really only do high 20 knots. This was more so they could dart out to a position quickly and establish an ASW barrier.
Oh, God.
Which, similar philosophy to the Alpha class, by the way. But... Which, don't underestimate the Alphas. Yes, they sounded like two skeletons going at it in a trash can.
I want that on a t-shirt.
They were fast enough with reasonable enough torpedoes and reasonable enough active sonar that they could be a serious problem, particularly in the 1970s.
Why do you need to hide when you can just run?
And even at very slow speed, because they had two electric creep motors, as long as it wasn't the surrounding environmental noise wasn't so quiet, generally speaking, in and around an ice pack, it wasn't. That you could hear the reactor plant noises. Which are different on the Alphas because they're a molten sodium reactor.
Sodium.
Yes.
Yep.
A very high efficiency reactor. The only problem is you can never turn it off, because if you turn it off, your reactor's gonzo. Because it's the coolant, the molten sodium, solidifies.
Ah.
But so as long as it wasn't the ambient noise in the water wasn't quiet enough at below 5 knots, they were reasonable submarines too.
Couple minor points with regards to the Alpha class. The first off, lead-cooled reactors.
Or lead cooled. It wasn't sodium.
Yeah,
It was
It was
metal.
lead bismuth eutectic. And the other thing was you could sometimes turn them off. The issue they ran into is they were designed so that they could accept external superheated steam from a shore-based facility, which was designed to keep it all molten. But you could still turn the reactors off. Unfortunately, those facilities didn't work 90% of the time.
Oh, so
Hey-yo.
we shall make this
mean-
thing and it won't work.
One of the big
Pretty much.
survivability factors of the Alphas, apart from anything else, was the fact that with their titanium pressure hulls, they could just go deep enough that the majority of torpedoes that would be fired at them would hit crush depth before they got to the
Yeah.
Alphas.
Deep enough
Basi-
enough and fast enough.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
That's
so,
that's metal as fuck.
yeah. So basically,
There's a whole
Alpha.
bunch of Soviet submarines that could do that.
Yeah.
The Papas, the Mike, or I should say the Papa, the Mike.
Sierra?
Sierras could do it.
So basically, Soviet doctrine
think the-
evolves around
um,
go deep and speed.
No, the Sierra. By the time the Sierras came out, Mark 48 was out, and that could dive deeper than them. Because U.S. Intel had learned about the mics and went, no, or learned about the mic
Yeah.
design and went, no.
I don't remember where I found it, but there was a fascinating story, like write up on how the U.S. figured out that they were using titanium hulls somewhere. I haven't found it in 4 years, but they basically
the
they
Russian.
managed to acquire the shavings from the dockyard and figured out they were titanium, and nobody believed it.
I mean, why would you? Who would use a titanium hull? Where would you get that much titanium?
Russia.
Well,
No,
it's not so much
it's not so much where would you get it. It's the actual welding it, because you have to do it in a vacuum.
What?
Yeah,
or
they
a
did it in-
non-reactive medium, but yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they did it in argon-filled welding chambers whilst wearing essentially heat-proof spacesuits.
That's
Yeah.
metal. That's metal as all hell.
Well, I mean, it literally is.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
metal, a lot of very, very tough
Why
metal.
are the so? Why were the so? Well, I would say why were the Soviet Navy so bonkers, but we all know why.
Yeah,
Well, they actually had, believe it or not, at that point, they actually had probably the most extensive experience working with titanium because, okay, fair enough, the MiG-25 was mostly steel, but with the MiG-31, they devolved their titanium manufacturing capabilities quite a bit. They actually knew more about working with titanium in large quantities than the West did, although,
Yep.
the West did have some titanium processing of its own, but on a much smaller
And
scale.
most of that
in
titanium,
submarines.
that the West got was from the Soviet Union. Not all of it, but for reference, the titanium that went into the SR-71s procured via trade from the Soviet Union.
Which is, all right, interesting.
Yeah, I mean the
And it
Alphas.
gets even funnier when you consider they thought about building a triple sonic interceptor based off of that.
I know that thing. The A21 is just silly.
A12.
Sorry, A12 is just a silly goober of a machine.
All of the triple sonic interceptors were.
The funniest part about the Alpha threat is that it was one of the things that prompted the Royal Navy to go from having quite possibly the worst NATO submarine launched torpedo system in the mid-Cold War to having one of the best, if not arguably the best, non-rocket powered torpedoes by the end of the Cold War. Because Tigerfish was just
Abysmal.
bad. I mean, there's a reason they used World War II era Mark 8s on the Belgrano. But then,
Spearfish
Fine.
wouldn't come in until after, but yeah.
yeah, 5 years later, you've got Spearfish, which can go deep enough to catch an alpha and doesn't care that the alpha is fast because the Spearfish is faster by a lot.
Mark 48 could catch as well. And then AdCap just improved on that.
What's
I
AdCap
think
at right now?
I think
60? AdCap's at 60
the
now,
difference
isn't it?
is the 48
don't
ad
know.
cap can go further, but the Spearfish is the speed demon at full speed if it needs to. It's like 80 plus knots or something like that. Ridiculous.
Basically, the RN took the Tigerfish back to the manufacturer, thrust it into their hands, and said, "Fix this."
No, they didn't. They
No,
just
it was
threw it
new.
out.
Yeah, brand new design.
Really? Oh,
The Tigerfish was crippled by all sorts of things, up to and including ridiculous government penny pinching when it was first being
Jeez.
developed.
Where
I
have we
don't
heard that
believe
before?
Yeah.
The government not wanting to spend money?
the British
Well,
British government not willing to release funds for an important military project for their important submarines.
The really dumb thing was that the particular weakness of Tigerfish, apart from its reliability and rather anemic warhead compared to a Mark 8, was that the Tigerfish, believe it or not, completely lacked the ability to engage surface targets in 1982.
What?
What?
It was designed and the prototype was constructed with the ability to engage submarine and surface-based targets, but if you're looking at a homing torpedo that uses a sonar head, engaging an underwater target has a slightly different profile because that's a full 3D environment. If you engage a target on the surface, you've got a ceiling. So it requires a bit of extra software for a torpedo to work out how to attack a target on the surface or within the first 50 feet from the surface while it's dealing with the sea surface. And Tigerfish had that, and some genius in the Treasury looked at it and went, but if we eliminate that circuit board, that will save us like 2% of the price per torpedo. So, considering this torpedo is supposed to be used to engage submarines, because I decided it is, therefore we don't need this circuit board, therefore eliminate it. So they did, and the Tigerfish was fractionally cheaper at the expense of not being able to engage anything that was vaguely close to the surface of the ocean.
It makes you wonder how the UK Armed Forces are still alive at this point.
Well, that's a product of the late 1970s Labour government. So, given the state the UK was in the late 1970s, the fact that the Tigerfish worked at all in any way, shape, or form is somewhat surprising.
There were a lot of strange optimization decisions made. I mean, then again, there always have been. And this wasn't even Royal Navy only, like the British Army, for example. With Warrior, which I do want to correct something I said last week, but partial correction. Warrior now has a power traverse. Still only has hand crank elevation for the 30mm Rardin. However, as originally fielded, did not have either. It just had hand crank for traverse elevation, no stabilizer. It still doesn't have a stabilizer, and is still manually fed via 3-round clips. That was an optimization thing for a EMP affected battlefield. Everybody else just looked at that and went, we'll just do what we've always done, and had a manual backup for the power traverse system. Thank you.
The modernization to Tigerfish, which they got in the mid-80s to allow it to engage surface targets, was literally just dragging the engineer who'd made the original circuit board out of retirement and going, do you have any left? And he's like, well, I got this, but this one I kept for posterity. And they're like, oh, we can just copy that and install it back in the place where it was supposed to be. Magically, now it has surface engagement capability.
Britain suffers.
No, Britain suffers at the hands of the Treasury for the most part.
What was it you said, Drac, that Fish said the enemies of man were? Oh, sorry, the Navy were? It's the devil in descending order. It's the devil, the enemy,
Satan, the enemy, and the Treasury.
Yeah,
in
that's
ascending order.
That's the one. God damn. Put it simply, if you send HMS Belfast to the Battle of the Nile, it's over in 5 minutes.
Doesn't even take that long.
One torpedo into every French capital ship, one 6-inch round into every French capital ship. Job done. Vanguard's scrapped at that point, Zola powered. Vanguard is sleeping with the fishes.
She's not.
Oh, isn't she?
Sleep.
Oh, but also
No.
also sending Vanguard to the Suez Crisis is perhaps not advised.
Well, they sent Jean Bar.
Yeah, Jean Bar was there.
Oh. Well,
Like the thing with the Suez Crisis, isn't versus what the U.S. has there. It's how the U.S. decides to respond to that, along with the Soviets, if that were to have kicked off.
yeah.
And that's going to get very awkward very quickly. But in particular, very awkward because this is not a period where the U.S. believes in limited warfighting.
Oh.
And looks at the Atlantic
Oh.
and looks at SAC,
Mm.
i.e., Strategic Air Command.
Oh.
That's the problem with the Suez Crisis.
Yeah.
It's just a teensy weensy little problem.
Yeah. Well, it's not that the US wanted an excuse to tactically nuke everything, it's just that the US didn't believe in limited conflict.
The U.S. didn't believe in limited conflict. And
If we're gonna go to war, we're gonna go to war.
this is also the period where tactically nuke everything? No. We're going to strategically nuke everything.
I think in the mid-50s, the US didn't even have tactical nukes. It was just nukes.
It was just nukes. And the warfighting concept was complete destruction of the enemy.
There can't be any communists
fast
left
as
in the
possible.
USSR if the USSR doesn't exist anymore.
Well, let me put it to you this way: the exercise enemy for U.S. Army ground forces in the period was the Circle Trigonists. Their equipment was not Soviet-esque. Their equipment was French.
Oh. Oh my.
The Circle Trigonists were the not French. Yeah, that should let you know what our opinion of de Gaulle was.
Oh. Good
We
God.
thought it was the best goddamn thing around. Clearly.
That's a...
No, we weren't really on the same side, but both powers were very much anti-colonial. And that is more or less how they both approached the Suez Crisis.
Yeah, it's basically, you've somehow made both superpowers agree that what you're doing is a bad thing. Which
Yes,
is an
because
achievement.
both are very much anti-colonialist.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to do is very clearly attempt to reassert yourself as a colonial power in that case, and the U.S. and the Soviets raise an eyebrow and go, no.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's also the small problem of the fact that although the Suez Crisis is a fairly major deployment of assets for both the Royal Navy and the Marine Nationale and associated armed forces, you're talking about the mid to late 1950s, where you're already seeing the effects of, because I mean, the worst of the economic shock from post World War II is over, but you're already seeing the treasuries of Britain and France trying to, well, do what they usually do, which is cripple anything actually useful. So, if Britain and France had gone back to pre-war military spending levels, then the fleet they sent to Suez and their overall level of deterrence might actually have been an actual level of deterrence. But they were essentially trying to do what they'd done pre-war with a shoestring budget.
Which turns out you can't play in the big league anymore without big league budget, which neither of them had.
Well, they had the money. It's just the politicians didn't want to spend it on the military. It's the classic: get the military to do what we tell it to do, but not actually pay for anything that we want it to do.
It's aggressively
It's
silly.
the same way. It's the same way that for a good chunk of the recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, the MOD was funding those conflicts out of its operational budget, not out of any additional funds voted to it in Parliament. Hence why we have a lot of Challengers and Warriors and everything else in storage, because there was, you're taking the maintenance budget for the armored units to pay for Jackals and what have you to keep things running in Afghanistan, and well, mostly Afghanistan, because Iraq kind of wound down a little bit quicker than that. But
Ban moment? I mean, if someone says something about a ban moment, I'm like, ban just exists. Simple as. Anyway, moving on. Well, I mean, me and you have butted heads over ban before, Drax, so we'll not repeat that dance again.
Yeah, well, I've got another 5-10 minutes before I need to head off to get some dinner and continue the lovely course of antibiotics that's supposed to hopefully recover my ability to speak.
Well, that's good at least.
I could see where you might need that.
Yes.
Yeah, shockingly.
Before you go, Drac, and while you're here for a few minutes more, Sea Dodders has sent you something, along with a blurb of text, I believe.
I will be right back.
For something I'm planning to do in a month's time, maybe.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Yes, it's part of a big thing I'm bringing together finally, after many, many, many years of it existing in a weird form.
Mm-hmm.
But no spoilers. No spoilers for anybody. No spoilers. It's a lot of the Japanese Navy was just left in harbours around the home islands, rusting, until resources could be found to lift it. Because it turns out that when you bomb a country as aggressively as Japan was bombed in 44-45, you tend to have a lack of infrastructure to raise large warships, it turns out, shockingly enough.
It's almost like that infrastructure was specifically targeted as well.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Yep. People often say, what about preservation of multiple Japanese warships? There's basically no chance of any Japanese warfighting vessel above destroyer grade surviving for preservation at all.
I mean, they had Nagato, and Nagato was put at near the dead center of the Able shot for Crossroads, specifically because they wanted to have a symbolic vaporization of the command ship for the Pearl Harbor raids. It's not their fault. The US Army Air Force couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a nuke, so she survived.
What do you mean you missed?
Yeah, I was trying to work that. I couldn't remember. The thing is, I couldn't remember what
you were
franchise.
essentially dropping it with a Norton bomb sight, and you had some very violent maneuvers you needed to do immediately post drop. So,
yeah, I was trying to remember what I can't remember what franchise it's from, but I remember there's either an audio or video thing where someone went, "How could you miss? It was 6 feet in front of you."
Oh, it's Monty Python with the Soviet shot with the Soviet rifleman. Fire! Bang!
Okay.
How could you miss? He was right there!
Yeah. It's just like, the thing is, it's like you look at the... I mean, okay, it's high-level bombing, but you look at the high-level bombing that was done at the beginning of World War II, and 1940-41... S-71 S-79 Spavieros could land bombs closer to their target than that B-29 managed, and those targets were moving.
Yeah, there we go. Execution in Russia. Oh god,
Yeah.
it's priceless. One of the things that I remember watching your Trafalgar video, the one you did recently, the finale of the Nelson series. I was slightly saddened to not see the angry French admiral meme appear. Admiral Magon, too angry to die, says, "I'm going to go to the capital ship to fight Villeneuve for retreating."
I might include that at some point. I don't know when. It's probably going to be a couple of years out. But to give you some idea, the script for the Battle of Trafalgar video that eventually came out was 13 pages long.
Christ.
That was condensed from a script that is 197 pages long, which in and of itself could make a reasonable sized book on the Battle of Trafalgar if it wasn't for the fact that there are infinite books on the Battle of Trafalgar.
Good lord.
And that was a relatively heavily edited script. So at some point in the future, I may revisit Trafalgar as a multi-part series, which is basically a kind of a minute by minute, or maybe like 10-minute segments or something like that, where essentially we just go, right, it's this minute. We're now going to review everything of note that's happening across the entire fleet. We're now going to run it forward by 5 minutes. And now this is everything that's happening of note, etc., etc. And there is enough detail on Trafalgar to actually do that, even though we don't know what colours most of the French and Spanish ships were painted. It's a very weird battle when it comes to what kind of knowledge we actually have.
Yeah. Zola, in regards to the battleship Potemkin, the Black Sea in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution was a very weird place. Because you got the Germans coming in to seize Ukraine and the Russian Black Sea Fleet. You've then got the Whites taking over a few years later after the Germans have sabotaged a good chunk of the Black Sea Fleet. You've then got the Reds showing up and the Whites trying to again sabotage the Black Sea Fleet. And then what's left is handed over to the Red Navy. It's hard to overstate quite how hard the Russian Black Sea Fleet falls in the Russian Civil War. They go from having multiple dreadnought battleships, purpose-built for Black Sea operations, to having precisely none. It is honestly sad. There was never any hope of Potemkin being preserved by the Russians.
No, I'll answer one more question before I head off. This last one about if Saratoga was fixed up and kept in operation after the war. Saratoga could actually have operated a surprising variety of jet aircraft, because you've got the Essex class with their 17.5 foot hangar clearance. The Saratoga has a 20-foot flight clearance, hangar clearance.
With some major refits, I mean, they flew A3Ds off of Essexes. So if you do a major refit on her, I'm not sure why you do it, but if you did, you're not going to get a Tomcat off of her, but operate Tomcats efficiently off of her. But she'd be good for Phantoms and A3Ds.
I mean, she's got the same flight deck length as the longer unit Essexes. So in terms of aircraft that you can operate off of her for launch purposes, you basically just refer to what they managed to get off of the longer hull, longer bow Essex class.
Dromo, theoretically, yes. You could, but she's not lasting into the late 70s.
We're talking theoretical, not practical here.
Yeah, well, her hull is pretty bashed up from all the torpedoes and bombs she absorbed during the war. Her machinery is going to need complete and utter overhaul.
Yeah, Saratoga
The
by this point
carriers
is worn
not
out.
happening that piss me off are the what is it, the Maltas. Forget CVA-01. I don't think that would have been a efficient cost-wise ship.
No, it's
But the
been said that
Maltas
the
as
CVA one's being
being
cancelled.
refit. Yeah. But like very much like, by the way, I am of that same opinion with USS United States. But the Maltas getting a Midway style refit would be very useful for the Royal Navy, and you may have seen fixed wing Catobar carrier aviation stay around longer in the Royal Navy as a result, because they would have had ships they could have actually fielded for and capability that was worth the cost.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I ran the numbers. If you look at the mid 1950s, where we're still running all the illustriouses, we're throwing money down the endless pot, then the endless black hole that is Victorious. You've still got the Implacables around. You've got, a baker's dozen of Majestics and Centaurs and etc., all the 1942 light fleet carriers and their derivatives. Unicorn still poking around, and Ark Royal and Eagle are in the process of shudderingly slowly being completed. And you look at the actual maintenance and running costs of all those small flight decks and compare that. I ran the calculations and I worked out that for about 65 to 70% of the mid-1950s Royal Navy carrier operational budget, you could run a fleet that was all 4 Maltas, 4 Audacious, and any 2 of the Centaurs, if you wanted to. So, and I mainly included the Centaurs because the Royal Navy saw Unicorn's sort of fleet carrier maintenance and operational support role and went, that's really cool. Converted I think it's 2 Colossus class into Perseus and Pioneer into support vessels. But that ironically enough, Unicorn lasted longer than her 2 successors. But in theory, you could run 4 Maltas, 4 Audacious, and 2 Centaurs converted to Unicorn-style support carriers and save an awful lot of money. And it gives you...
And you'd have far more capability.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they can carry about 2.5 times as many aircraft as the entire Royal Navy mid-1950s historical carrier fleet. And they can all carry modern aircraft. And it also gives the Royal Navy a huge amount of ablative shielding when it comes to maintaining a decent carrier strike force, because you can offer
trim out the chaff.
Yeah, you can offer up as the budgets get cut. You can offer up Audacious class, or my idea would have been first to sacrifice to the 2 Centaurs, then the next sacrifice would be convert 2 of the Audacious into the support carrier role that you've lost with the 2 Centaurs, and then you drop the other 2 Audacious class. So you've now survived 3 rounds of massive budget cutting, and you've still got a pair of Audacious class which can act as either fleet support or amphibious assault carriers, and you've still got 4 full-size Malta class. And then if you want to start doing Midway style refits on them and the Treasury gets a little bit jumpy about that, you can then technically throw the last 2 Audacious at them to get your refits through.
And also you can shout economy of scale at them, which will make them shut up.
Yeah, well
that doesn't work historically with Treasury.
No, you'd reach the mid to late 1970s and the Royal Navy's got 4 hopefully fairly decently refitted Maltas floating around, at which point even with the late 1970s UK government being as dumb as rocks, even then you could potentially offer to like historically, they parked Eagle to act as a spare parts depot for Ark Royal. You could probably park one of them as a spare parts and budget-saving measure to keep the other three running, which would survive the Labour government long enough to get into the 80s. And fair enough, Margaret Thatcher probably would have tried to cut them as well, but you would have had this rather helpful Argentinian lunatic turn up. Whether or not he actually would have gone to the Falklands with 3 Maltas floating around is another matter. But he might get desperate enough.
We basically have to have him go, because one of the things that saves the RN in the thing that we're doing is basically the fact that by 1982, the RN 6-inch cruisers that they built post-war, the Minotaurs and the Tigers, are in reserve. Vanguard herself has had a refit in 1973 and is in reserve. And basically, the Falklands War pulls everything out and is basically a massive win for the RN. And basically, they ride a wave into the mid 80s of just popular support and support from the government. It also doesn't help that the Argentinians have an Essex into South Dakota.
What?
It just go with it.
No. Back to the real world.
See, this is the great thing. As a half Bolivian, I can post memes like the one I just put in chat and get away with it because it's not me being Anglo against the Argentinians. The Anglo side of me doesn't really care about Argentina one way or the other. The Bolivian side of me, on the other hand, if you look at a map of most hated countries, like which country hates the other country the most, you'll notice the circle around Argentina is surrounded purely by countries that hate Argentina more than any other country on the planet.
Yeah. But back to the real life Royal Navy. What were the designed hangar heights on the Maltas, and how did they compare with the Midway hangar heights?
It depends on which particular Malta which variation of the Maltas you're looking at.
I'm trying to figure out if the one that was most likely to be built.
There's 2 main contenders for that. I've got my.
Could take an E2.
I've got my carrier reference here. Hopefully, it will tell me. Yeah, Maltas. 17 and a half foot for the 880 foot version. So Essex class hangar height.
So Essex. Oof. That could be a little problematic.
A little bit.
I mean,
how tall is a Gannet?
Technically, the E2 could be fit on a Essex, but I don't think you'd be taking her in the hangar at all. You'd be pretty much having to deck park them. The Midways, as far as I'm aware, only hangared them for maintenance because of how close it was. And the reason I'm jumping to E2 is that, like, even into the 80s, you don't have to have it, but you're going to, in the 80s, you're going to want to be replacing Gannet at some point, and you're going to need a fixed wing aircraft for that. And there's really only one viable solution out there. If there was another, the French would have gone with it later on.
I see where you're going with this.
The maximal Malta is 938 feet long, which is interestingly enough is 6 foot longer than Midway. Maximal Malta has a 20-foot hangar height. But there were the reason Maximal Malta got eliminated in the last round of design options was basically because they were concerned that it couldn't fit in some of the overseas dry docks.
Wait a minute. What was the hangar height for the other one you said? Was it
17 and a half.
Okay, so that's actually no. Looking at the midways here, yeah, you could do it. Which is good because, quite frankly, I don't see Gannett lasting past the early 80s, and heck, it might even in the late 70s get retired.
I'd be surprised if it lasted that long. What would
they were fairly durable ships, aircraft. I mean, yeah, as you said, Midway has the same hangar height as the final plan Malta. So
we were discussing the buy-in for RN assets to replace the Phantoms and the Gannets and other aircraft. Buccaneer would probably have to remain for a bit in the
Phantom
80s.
does not require a replacement.
It will by the 80s.
We were toying between Rolls-Royce engine.
Particularly British.
Yeah, we were toying between the options we have on the table right now are Rolls-Royce engined Tomcat, or
not going to be able to operate from the Maltas at all,
or waiting for F-18. So
the F-18 starts filtering into service in the very late 70s with the A model through the 80s. To be honest, the Legacy Hornet's probably going to be your best bet.
So go with Hornet then.
Because keeping Phantoms around, particularly the FGR2, or FRG2, whatever the order is, it does not have appropriate avionics. The engines on it, while more powerful, they were also heavier, so its effective thrust to weight was the same as the regular Navy Phantom, U.S. Navy Phantom.
Yeah. We weren't sure if we wanted...
Skyflash...
Go on.
By this point, Skyflash is a rapidly decreasing capability Sparrow relative to the other Sparrows that are out there. Because it is running the older, shorter monopulse motor. And that probably needs to go as well. The Legacy Hornet would dramatically increase the capability of the air wing to conduct strike, to conduct seed, to deal with air defenses.
Yeah, we weren't sure if we were going to have we weren't sure if we were going to go for either a single round buy-in, e.g. replace Buccaneer and Phantom all at once, or if we go for a phased buy-in and replace Phantom first, and then in the late 80s replace Buccaneer. What's definitely going to have to happen though is there's going to have to be a buy-in of Hornet, E2 Hawkeye, and Viking.
You ain't operating an E3 Sentry from a ship.
Yeah, sorry, I know.
I want to see it.
I got it wrong, sorry. But yeah, there's going to have to be a buy-in of E2 Hawkeye and Viking for ASW tanker work and airborne early warning work respectively. The only question is, do we buy Hornet to replace Phantom and Buccaneer in the early 80s all at once, or do we buy the Phantom replacements first and then later on replace Buccaneer in the late 80s?
Honest, I would. The Buccaneer is going to be the lowest priority. So Phantom get replaced by Legacy Hornet. Then I would go for the E2. For tanker work, honestly, I guarantee you can fit Buccaneer. If she didn't already have buddy stores, I guarantee you could run Buccaneers with buddy stores. They'd be fine for it. Because realistically, you're only going to be tanking up your Hornets with that. Buccaneers got more than enough range off of the ship. So the S3 Viking wasn't designed to be a tanker. What the US did was first KA3, and then KA6, which were versions of attack aircraft set up for tanking solely.
So basically, have the Buccaneer transform into a dual-role strike tanker platform at first, and then when the Hornet buy-in for them comes in, keep a few of them around as tanker aircraft.
I'm not sure I'd want to replace the Buck with a Hornet.
Oh, what's your reasoning?
Buccaneer can carry a lot more in strike, a lot farther than a Legacy Hornet.
Fair
I'm
enough.
Talking about a Super Hornet.
Fair enough.
I don't know if you could keep them going longer, but if you couldn't,
they lasted till 90. Let me just check.
If they lasted until the mid 90s.
Yeah, because they were in Desert Storm in RAF colors.
Yeah, so in that case, keep them running, because guess what? You'll be able to replace them with Super Hornets.
Nice.
You can operate a Super Hornet off of a Malta or midway size carrier.
Nice. Yeah, retired. Retired March '94.
Given the Treasury and their slightly lunatic ideas, there is also another option if you're looking for a mid-80s replacement.
Oh.
So I checked. The height of a Tornado.
Oh no.
Is 2'2" tall in its single fin guise, but the original version of the Tornado was going to be twin fin.
Why'd they get rid of the twin fin?
Germany.
Oh.
Germany complained a twin fin system would cost too much, so they went with a single larger tail fin. But yeah, you could potentially have a twin fin Tornado. I mean, it would be a hilariously stupid idea considering the size and weight of the Tornado. But the Treasury would probably argue, given that the RAF would probably still be demanding strike and fighter variants, they'd probably argue commonality of parts and then promptly build a fighter version of the Tornado that has virtually nothing similar to the strike version.
God damn it.
Yeah.
If you want to see really, really cursed stuff.
Wait, Sea Dodders, is that a folding fin Tornado? What the?
Yeah, I suppose you could do a folding fin version. So there is the there you have the original BAE proposal for a mid 1980s combat aircraft.
That's just Jaguar on a little bit of performance enhancers.
Yeah, it's a Tornado Jaguar hybrid with canards. And then you've got this thing, which is the original EAP or Agile Combat Aircraft. That is the direct ancestor of the Typhoon.
Can we really navalize that? Maybe?
I mean, it would be... A navalized twin-tail Tornado would theoretically be possible for a mid-1980s introduction, because the Tornado is a 1970s era project. The Agile Combat Aircraft -EAP prototypes are mid-80s prototype projects, so even if they decided to go it alone, you're not going to see them in service until roughly the historical time period you get Typhoon.
So basically what we're looking at is, if we get Legacy Hornet, we're looking at Super Hornet replacing Buck, or a navalized Tornado Strike replacing Buck in the mid-80s, with Tornado replacing Buck in the 90s or late 80s, Legacy Tornado coming in the early 80s to replace Phantom, and then at some point in the 90s, 2000s, this aircraft, in whatever navalized form it comes out in, replacing Legacy Tornado as the fleet's air defense fighter / multi-role asset.
I think if you were trying to strike a balance between what's practical and and keeping some British manufacturing capability in there, to keep the politicians happy, you're probably best off going with twin-tail Tornado, replacing the Buccaneer as a strike aircraft, because it's got to be big and carry a lot of ordnance anyway.
Yeah.
But go with Hornets as your fighters.
So basically, just replace Legacy Hornet with Super Hornet when the time comes.
Well, or when did Super Hornet come out?
Super Hornet started in the mid '90s.
So that fits with what we were.
Which would give you time on your Legacy Hornets to, lifespan wise, to cycle them out as you start getting Super Hornets in. Super Hornet would also be dramatically beefing up your strike capability of your carriers alongside the twin tail Tornadoes, but would be a dramatic improvement in fighter capability compared to the Legacy Hornet.
And of course, we're still operating Hawkeye and Viking for AW and ASW respectively.
If it's a mid '90s start for the Super Hornet program, you'd be running vanilla Hornets for about 2 decades, and then it would be a competition between Super Hornet and Typhoon, whatever flavor it eventually comes in, for the fighter role in the competition starting in the late '90s, going into the early 2000s.
Yeah, although
operating from land, Typhoon is a lot better, but being that sort of delta wing on ship, and as big as Typhoon is, because Super Hornet can fold up to be the size of a Rafale, which is dramatically smaller.
How are we going to deal with Tornado? Are we just going to swing the wings in like F-14?
That's what you do with a swing wing. You just swing them all the way back. You sweep them all the way back.
I mean, given that we kept the GR4s running until very recently, I think the strike element using a twin fin Tornado could probably have been kept around to be replaced by F-35.
Yep.
It's got the longevity for it. It would be the fighter variant that would need rolling over. And as Cyclic said, you've got the competition between the Typhoon and the Super Hornet is going to be a case of if you navalize the Typhoon, how much of that capability edge are you going to lose relative to the Super Hornet?
Dromasaurus does
lose a lot.
That's true, but Dromasaurus does make a point here that might bring politics into it in a way that might swing it in the Typhoon's favor, despite the capability loss.
Here's the thing, right? With Super Hornet, you are piggybacking off of a major U.S. Navy buy. There is likely going to be, because the Royal Navy buy isn't going to be small, even if you only have 2 ships. Like, that's still
100 odd.
That's still like 4.
We're looking at 3. The planned replacement is 3 60,000-ton carriers to replace the Maltas, to replace 4 Maltas.
That I'm not considering alt history here, Fleet. I am purely considering real world.
Oh, fair enough.
You're still looking at 4 to 6 squadrons, realistically here.
Nice.
So, I mean, at maximal, that's 6 squadrons using
I'm
British
assuming 3 carriers, right?
Yeah, that would be
2 per squadron per carrier here.
You'd need 96 aircraft to fill 6 squadrons completely, because British practice is 16 aircraft to the squadron, even if they don't all deploy. So you'd need 96 aircraft to fill 6 squadrons, and you'd need an OCU.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be there'd be about 110 aircraft.
With that, you'd be able to negotiate in some industrial offsets, some stuff for the entire program that's being run out of Britain. So.
Yeah, I mean the big problem is with the Rafale and France staying in the program is it's possible, but the
French want a dramatically different aircraft than Europe.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say it wasn't just the navalization that made the French build Rafale instead of Typhoon.
The French wanted a true multi-role aircraft. Eurofighter did not become a multi-role aircraft until the Brits made it one themselves. Nobody else's is.
So
everybody else wanted a sort of take the concept of the F-15 as a pure-blooded, purebred fighter, but do it in the 1990s, early 2000s. France, and this is the other thing, right? The UK could tag along on Rafale for the fighter. That's the other potential dark horse here.
Oh God, no.
Rafale is a really good naval fighter.
I'm not denying that it is, but the idea of French fighters operating from British carriers fills me with dread.
Well, it would be a joint project. To be honest, we've actually had much better success with joint projects with the French than we have with any other European country.
Look, I'm a Francophile as much as the next man. I have Hoche as my profile pic, for God's sake, but something about it just makes me go, ugh.
Well, as Cyclic points out, we got Jaguar and we got Concorde out of working with the French.
Damn it, he's out of line, but he's right.
So we got Typhoon. The main problem with working with larger European conglomerates is Germany.
Oh.
Because Germany will demand massive changes, try and get as much work share as humanly possible,
and
then radically cut it all down to minimum to cheapen it out, and then cut their order right down as well anyway. So you end up.
Potter's just mentioned Gazelle, Puma, Storm Shadow / Scout.
Oh, he's right. So we might see the last air wing of the Maltas being Rafale.
No, this would be the follow-on carriers.
Oh, sorry, the follow-on carriers.
Because the Maltas aren't going to last as long as the Invincibles that came in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, if memory serves. That's when they came in. So, because the Maltas are from the 50s, they're probably going to last until the 90s, and that's the real danger period here. Because in the 90s, in that post-collapse of the Soviet Union environment, the Royal Navy will be needing to build replacement carriers. So what I suspect is going to happen is you're going to see a less ambitious QE style of Catobar carrier, but you're going to go from 3 to 2 or 4 to 2, right? You're not probably going to get more than 2, which is
maintain size. Yeah, maintain overall dimensions, roughly speaking. Increase hangar height and drop numbers of ships to satisfy the treasury.
Yeah. And hopefully without the lottle-dottle back and forth of Catovar Stoval. I think at one point somebody suggested Stobar. I could be wrong. That could be mixing in from the more modern things of refitting them. Stoval, Catobar. But it's entirely possible that you get 2 Catobar carriers in the sort of 60 to 70,000 ton range entering service in the late 90s, early 2000s to replace the now clapped out Maltas.
Preservation for one of the Maltas at Portsmouth, or just all scrap?
Probably not. You guys don't have the money for that.
We don't have the space. To be honest, there's nowhere at Portsmouth you could put one.
Yeah, that too.
If you're gonna have follow-on carriers, the big.
Look at how much space both QEs take up now.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only place you could put them as a museum ship, and that's the hot spot mooring point for the active navy.
And you cannot go any bigger than this, because this is already so big that you're having to do major dredging work in Portsmouth. Right? Anything bigger than this, they have to anchor out in the Solent.
Which is not good.
Either that, or you base them permanently up in the Forth, like the battle cruiser fleet.
Yeah, like those would be your options. And that second option is hilariously expensive.
Plus,
Because
it's
you have
kind
to
of like
rebuild all of that.
it's kind of like resonance points in metal. There's certain sweet spots for carrier design. If you're building something in roughly the 60-ish thousand ton range, plus or minus a little bit, you can get a useful flight group out of that. There's maybe 48 aircraft plus helicopters, with a bit of extra capacity built into it for surge. If you go above that into the, well, at least with modern ship design and aircraft sizes, if you go into the mid to high 70s all the way up to the low 90s, you don't gain all that much, except it costs a lot
Unless you
more.
go nuclear. If you stay conventional, yeah. If you go
But then
nuclear,
once you hit like 95 to 100,000 tons, you essentially unlock a ton of extra capacity, because it's all about hangar deck space and flight deck space. And it, for example, it doesn't really matter if you're storing your aircraft in such a way that you can store, let's say, 3 aircraft abreast. The fact that you can store 3 1/4, 3 1/2, 3 3/4 aircraft doesn't make the blindest bit of difference to your actual storage capability. It just makes it slightly roomier until you hit that size point where you can now have 4.
Yeah.
Now, it can greatly speed up maintenance and all of that, but
it's a lot to pay for just that capability.
Or spotting from hangar to flight deck, because that is a problem the QEs do have, particularly with the Merlins. Heard that one from the horse's mouth. But, and there's a design part of the Merlins that makes that particularly more problematic, unlike, say, a Sea King, where you could just leave a Sea King deck parked and not care.
Because the Sea King just doesn't care if it gets water everywhere.
The Sea King is rated for cold soak. The Merlin is not.
Well, the Sea King is essentially a boat that somebody attached rotor blades to.
It is a proper naval helicopter. It's like the Seahawk, where it was designed with cold soak in mind. Merlin wasn't.
The Merlin is essentially a land-based helicopter that we've subordinated into a fleet-based role.
I'm not going to lie to you, honest, that image goes hard of Fleet Air Arm tornadoes. That image goes hard.
Well, Fleet Air Arm Hornets go pretty hard too. Just in look. That livery on them.
Oh, did I say tornadoes?
You said tornado.
God damn it!
I mean, the fun thing is actually if you get Hornet, you're talking about the 80s. You would probably actually still get the that rather fetching purple-blue color scheme that the Sea Harriers had.
That's nice. I can see that in my head now. That's nice.
With a little black radome.
Yeah. Also, you can see the little the E2 Hawkeye sneaking into the frame in the background. Like, I want to be part of the picture too.
Hiding behind the jet blast deflectors.
Yeah. That does.
Yeah, what you'd probably get is something akin to this.
Oh, that is nice.
There you go.
Samurai, please no.
Then we've got White Hornet, which is light grey.
That's the RAF. Or possibly modern day Royal Navy.
How many
You've
bombs?
got this one as well, which is just.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
That is.
That's the 1970s. Actually, no, that's Sea Harrier FRS-1.
Oh,
so that's early 80s.
That's probably what you'd see initially.
Yeah, that's the Falklands. That's the Falklands Harrier scheme.
That blue-white just goes.
Yeah.
You know what it reminds me of? Which, funnily enough, there is a Union Jack in this photo because the pilot flying the CAG bird of this squadron is a transfer pilot.
Nice.
Or he is flying past the QE, but this is a Super Hornet of the Blue Blasters.
Very similar.
That's very nice.
That's the CAG bird. None of the rest of the squadron is dressed up like that, but
Oh.
Yeah, the first one that's all blue. That's the FRS2 Sea Harrier late 80s, early 90s scheme.
So we're basically in ascending order looking at when they first entered the service, Cyclic's last picture with the blue-white. Then you're looking at blue by the mid-80s. And then by the 90s, you're looking at the picture when they're on the cats.
Maybe.
Of that grey.
Maybe. I mean, it depends if they decide to change the color scheme. They may not, because I mean, the FRS2 stayed in purple blue all the way through their service lives.
That's true. And then,
Some of them still are. Randomly wandering around Yodleton.
I've got a question.
Pretending not to be operational.
Cyclic, when the Buccaneers finally do bow out, what replaces them as tankers for the Fleet Air Arm?
Realistically, because it's the 90s, you're not getting a dedicated tanker.
Oh no, I know that, but what aircraft steps up?
You're just gonna be doing, like, every aircraft is capable of using buddy stores. Like, there's a reason the U.S. Navy, up until very recently, when they were like, okay, yeah, we're actually gonna have to be running strike packages out 600, 700, 800 miles from the carrier. That is what caused the U.S. Navy to go, we need to do an reintroduction of a dedicated tanking platform. And that's the other thing about the Royal Navy keeping Catobar capability, even in the sort of smaller size range here. The Royal Navy would be able to conduct actual strike packages from the sea, which is very important. And one of the problems they have right now, when you talk with Royal Navy officers, I'm not going to mention names because rules, but when you talk with Royal Navy officers about current carrier strike capability, they're very pessimistic because they can't do strike packages. Not meaningfully. And that's assuming even they had all the F-35Bs.
That's depressing.
And they can't go very far without tankers.
That's depressing.
It's a consequence of not going Catabar.
I know. What are we looking at?
We'll see how that changes.
Yeah, what are we looking at operating to fill the gap once the half Catobar refit appears? The one they're thinking about.
Well, we don't even know. So they're not thinking about a single type of refit. They haven't narrowed that down yet.
So they might go
still
full.
Looking at no. They don't even consider full Catobar or return to Catobar politically or financially feasible.
Right.
At least from what I have heard. So they're still looking out there at what's possible, but one of the things they want, even if it is the only thing they can get, is a cross-deck set of a cross-deck landing area,
like what CDOT has just posted,
a resting gear, and a catapult capable of launching MQ-25.
Yeah.
Because just with that, they will dramatically extend the reach of UK carrier strike.
CDOT has beat me to it, but at the recent defence conference, they proposed this project Arc Royal, which is turning the QEs into semi-Catobar. It's basically Catobar, but for drones.
It's basically what Cyclic just said, in essence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So MQ-25 would require that 90-meter cat.
What is MQ-25? Remind me again.
Drone.
MQ-25 Stingray. It is.
Is that the flying wing MacGuffin? That's the tanker.
It's not a flying wing.
No. It looks a little bit like some of the more advanced cruise missiles with extra wings attached to it.
Oh.
Like a lawn dart.
Let me go do a bit of the old Googling.
Here, I'll get you a photo that'll show you the scale here.
Oh, it's this thing. Oh, yeah. I know what you mean now. Yeah, it's the...
Yeah.
It's
the size of a Super Hornet.
Large lad.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to carry gas.
but cheap.
I mean, the extra fun thing about it is, if you remember a few years ago, I pointed out that if you're actually on the flight deck of a QE, you notice a very suspicious line of deck plating that runs parallel to the ski ramp. where they honestly haven't left a trough for a catapult to be installed.
Definitely not. No,
And
how could they? How could they be so
that
careless?
just happens to precisely align with the 55-meter catapult that's shown there on the right of the
What
main
is
flight.
Vixen?
That's a
It's-
separate drone.
Yeah, so it's the Royal Navy specific
program.
drone project.
I see.
The other thing of late that you should probably pay attention to is, well, the Royal Navy is calling it Mojave, but it is a Reaper turned maritime patrol
Ooh.
drone. It is capable of carrying a lightweight torpedo,
Oh.
or sonar buoys, or a radar capable of detecting sea skimming cruise missiles.
Are we gonna get drone AWACS?
Not AWACS, because they're not going to do.
Oh, sorry, AW.
the
My
far
mistake.
distance
My mistake. Sorry,
airwork- yeah,
AW. Sorry.
AEW. You very well may, because the AEW mission for Merlin
It's
is
terrible.
killing the fleet.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that it's terrible. It's literally killing the fleet because there are not enough aircraft.
Wow. So
And the ASW mission is going to be prioritized over that for obvious reasons.
if the MQ-9 enters service, will we see it as a replacement for Merlin in both AW and ASW roles, or is it just going to go AEW and let the Merlins do
It's gonna be
ASW work?
So those are modular kits for it. The Merlins will continue as the primary ASW helicopters of the fleet. Exactly, Cotters. The Crow's Nest Merlins were taken directly from the minimum viable ASW Merlin stock, because Treasury. And that is what's causing the regular Merlin fleet to get just run into the ground. Like, the trajectory is not sustainable. And so what you'll see, depending on how many they buy, you could see them used as a mix of things. They're not going to be replacing Merlin, because a fixed wing drone AEW or ASW platform would be more of a sort of S2 Viking-esque capability than a helicopter that's got a dipping sonar buoys, can carry 4 torpedoes, right?
And most importantly, is manned, so it can decide whether or not that target is. It's more easy for it to decide on the spot whether that target.
All that these days is controlled from ship.
Fair enough.
Like, yes, there is processing equipment on the helicopter, on a good ASW helicopter. However, the ships have far better data links to incorporate pictures from other ships. Like, they just have far more data, and the ASW engagement is controlled from the ship that is responsible for the engagement. It would be the same way with the drone. Bull, no. The RN was never going to realistically have a carrier large enough to efficiently operate F-14s. You'd need something the size of a Forrestal or Kitty Hawk, but preferably a Kitty Hawk or larger, to efficiently operate a squadron or 2 of F-14s.
So assuming, seeing as on this tangent we've been going on, by this point, these Catabar QEs basically by 2023, what would they be operating? Do you think the same air wings as we gave them when they were built?
Super Hornets and bringing in F-35C.
C, not B.
Yes. Because if you already have a Catabar capable carrier program with carriers already fielded, right? Why would you go with B? It is dramatically less capable. If the RAF wants their own Bs, fine. Realistically, just tell them to get Cs. Because it's actually more capable than the A. It's got better range, better strike payload, particularly when operating from land. More wing area, so better lift. Right? Yes, it's heavier, but again, more lift. Like you'd operate Cs. The other thing with the F-35C is you can carry things like Joint Strike Missile and 2,000-pound bombs internally. You cannot on the B.
I mean,
you have to have the space for the lift fan, and that just.
I mean, to be honest, the presence of the lift fan and the vertical takeoff element is largely down to the desire to replace the Sea Harriers for Stovall on the carriers, because the Harrier's vertical takeoff mission profile was relevant to a certain extent when the RAF had extensive bases in West Germany. It's not really relevant to the RAF these days, because
particularly in the period where this decision was being made. Although if you ask the RAF today, they're starting to get a little bit of a unhealthy obsession with that Harrier-esque capability again.
I think that's just because they've got it, so they're trying to think of ways to use it. Whereas, I mean, let's face it, even nowadays, the RAF's operational locations are mainland UK and the Falklands.
And Cantori, or however you say it. And
Cantori, and Cyprus. But they're all full-length runways, so there's no need in the RAF for vertical takeoff, except for the fact they wanted fleet commonality with the Royal Navy. But if the Royal Navy is operating Catobar...
And these days, with the expansion of commercial air traffic travel across Europe, there's really not a shortage of potential runways.
No.
That can easily launch F-35s, even with ballistic missiles putting massive craters down the runway.
And to be honest, if we're running out of airfields in the mainland UK,
something's gone horribly wrong.
To worry about than whether the fighters can take off vertically or not.
Yeah. I don't know how long off the top of my head they are, Cotters. I do know they are longer than what is required for MQ-25. Because they have to sling things like E2. And E2 is really heavy. You might be able to do that on a QE. It's not going to happen because the order has already been placed for F-35B. And F-35C is more expensive. Actually, I'd have to double... Yeah, it is, because economies of scale. Because right now, it is just the USN buying F-35C. Unless the French decide they want F-35C for some weird reason, that's all it's going to be. So, like, that is only going to happen as a decision by the British government if the British government already has Catobar carriers and Catobar air wings. And doesn't have the context of the Sea Harrier being the primary fighter of the Fleet Air Arm. If the Harrier is only an RAF aircraft, right? Because why would you use it if you have Catobar aircraft?
Yeah.
That are just superior in every way. Depends on the load, but probably.
God damn.
But again, you'd have one catapult on the ship.
Which is not ideal for sortie rate.
Yeah, no, it's just not going to happen. And you can get the strike range that the RA or Royal Navy wants with MQ-25.
On that note, I need to head off now because I'm now an hour late for dinner and I'm being yelled at. See you later.
Sorry, Drac. Bye. Nice having you.
See ya. There are some other more cursed options. I have heard it floated that they might buy Super Hornets for a heavier strike capability and fly them Stobar.
That does it work?
They have already been tested on a ramp like the QEs from land.
And it worked?
Yep, just fine.
Oh my god. That's a I had forgotten Stobar existed.
And if you're willing to launch with a light fuel load
and refuel in the
take
air,
a Super Hornet off with a decent payload if you run from the back of the ship off that ramp and then tank up off of an MQ-25. That test, by the way, the QE on her first deployment nearly had a test done. The only thing that stopped it was the head of UK Carrier Strike didn't have it within his authority to authorize the expense of getting Boeing to fly the test aircraft out to the Mediterranean for it, and then crane it on the ship and then do a test launch that way.
God damn.
And he couldn't get approval from people that wanted to do it. But it is something the Royal Navy is considering because Super Hornet is cheaper than F-35C.
So if Super Hornet comes in to do this Stobar strike role, then what's left for F-35C? Sorry, B.
High-end air-to-air and attack on hardened targets. Like hardened targets being stuff, strike that you need a stealth aircraft for.
So basically, you use the Super Hornets for your naval strike and ground strike that doesn't require stealth, and you keep
they can carry the standoff munitions, and they can back up 35Bs in air to air.
And
I extremely doubt this is going to happen, but I would laugh my ass off if the Royal Navy adopted a Cato Stowe bar carrier,
which would be the only one of its kind in the the only two of its kind in the world.
Operated Super Hornets in a Stowe bar setup.
Show the Russians how it's done.
That's honestly more cursed than what the Russians do.
Yeah, it would be, but it'd work. It'd work, though, you have to admit. Stobar is just... Yeah, Stobar by itself isn't. But Stobar with a catapult-launched tanker, however, is a different matter entirely. That's what makes this whole setup work. The fact that if the QEs get the fit that we're talking about, they can cat-launch an MQ-25. And at that point, you can full-load the aircraft with light fuel load, get them up in the air, and then tank them up mid-flight. Well, not mid-flight.
You're not loading them down full load. You're not taking a Super Hornet off with 10 2,000-pound bombs on it. But you will get a significantly heavier strike than you would out of a 35B. So depends on how many MQ-25s you have.
Hornet on an Audacious is just cursed. Actually cursed.
Cold War budget syndrome, Mako.
The RN just suffers through the Cold War. The RN just suffers.
The RN suffers because it can't make an argument for why it exists.
Yep.
In the Cold War, which is, and this is even post Falklands War. Yeah, Mako, that's
Yeah.
that's insulting.
What are you laughing at, Cyclic?
The bar Mako put. The just really
That's
low bar.
Jesus.
Fucking... At least we're not the Bulgarians. What kind of cockamamie bullshit is that supposed to mean?
Well, what it means is at least you're not having T-3485s on your roster in the fucking 80s.
Isn't that East Germany as well?
What was that?
I said, isn't that East Germany as well?
No. The Bulgarians had them in frontline units, not as training tanks.
Oh my fucking god. Ouch.
Could be worse. Look up when the Romanians switched over to T-55s.
Don't tell me. I don't want to know.
I don't know off the top of my head. I just know it was really late.
Bloody hellfire.
Now that said, it has resulted in them switching from upgraded T-55s to ordering M1A2 SEP V3s. Which is a heck of an upgrade.
Yeah, just a bit. See, Dodders, I have questions about your free time usage. Why are you launching F-14 Tomcats off bloody Kuznetsovs?
Amusement.
Yes, but that's not possible in real life. You can't launch a F-14 off a Kuznetsov. It won't handle the ramp. The landing gear's not strong enough.
Alright, so weld some rebar to it.
What the... I am going to shank you.
Now, stop being so stereotypical.
Look, I have the trowel, alright? It's a symbol of my might for a reason. See, Dodders, you're not rolling launching that bloody Su-27, are you?
It's got more than enough room.
Wait,
If
Cyclic.
you can manage to hold it back while it throttles its engines up, because you don't have the equipment for that on a U.S. carrier.
So they could actually do that, in theory.
If you had the right equipment to hold them back till they're up to full military power and then drop it as they go to burner, yeah. But that equipment doesn't exist on a U.S. carrier.
Bloody hell. Well, more you know. I mean,
They have
E2...
dramatically more room to take off.
Yeah. I mean, E2 is a very forgiving aircraft in terms of what it will accept for takeoff.
E2?
Yeah.
Not really. You need to yeet that thing off a carrier.
I never thought I'd hear you say the word yeet, but here we are.
It's an accurate descriptor.
Fair enough, it is an accurate descriptor, but still. Wait, could we even operate E2 off our hypothetical Malta refits? Would the cats take it? Given what you've just said?
They could be made to.
I suppose if the Essexes and Midways can operate E2, then
If you know it's a thing you're gonna have to do, they could be made to.
that's a point. Yeah, that's a fair cop.
Now,
Well, actually, Cyclic, I have a question for you.
Oh boy.
It was in regards to buying Viking for the Maltas. Would we buy Viking, or would we just stick with Seeking for ASW?
I would recommend sticking with the helicopters. You don't have the room on those carriers. You need to be focusing more on ensuring that you can operate at least a couple E2s.
Yeah.
Now, yes, Midway did operate them alongside, but the Midways weren't trying to be the foremost carriers of the U.S. Navy by that point. So, Bull Reeves, the Navy was still flying F-14As when they were retiring the F-14 type class. The Navy couldn't even upgrade them all to Bs because they never had the budget. Like,
the F-14 was a good aircraft, but it was a maintenance and money hog.
If they could have gotten them all to F-14D, the F-14 might have stuck around longer, but they couldn't.
I mean, I often get, like, a lot of people bash Kuznetsov, and I think they do it,
because it's funny.
yeah, but overall, I think she gets a bad rap because of her circumstance. If we look at the ship she actually is, without,
Well,
the
that's
being on
not what
fire.
happened. The F-14B was basically largely focused on getting the engines upgraded to mitigate the death trap that was the engine setup on the F-14A.
it's cyclic.
The
Sorry, go on.
B model upgrades were never fully rolled out because even under the Reagan defense boost to the Navy couldn't afford to maintain its F-14 fleet and simultaneously upgrade it to the F-14B. Now we roll out the F-14D at a time of falling budgets, and you can figure that out.
Cyclic, how do you rate Kuznetsov as built?
She would have been able to do her job of providing air cover over the fleet.
That's my assessment as
So-
well. And also, it's the reason why she's never
Now,
going to be retired.
She wasn't going to be able to defend the fleet perfectly against a U.S. carrier attack, but that was never her role. Her role was to keep maritime patrol aircraft away, to keep reconnaissance aircraft away. Now, what the Soviets didn't realize was the U.S.'s ability to queue ISR assets very, 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 very well. Now, yes, the system didn't work perfectly to the level that the U.S. Navy wanted, but there was a reason the U.S. Navy used TASM until the 90s. It's because in the 90s, that's when we backed off the space-based targeting system we had, so we could get a system that would work much, 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 much better. But it was good enough that you could pretty easily queue in a carrier, particularly a carrier strike fleets, Alpha strike in on them.
You've often said, Cyclic, or at least I think you have, if I'm remembering rightly, that Kuznetsov can't be retired because there's nothing to replace her capability. Or no budget to replace her capability in the Russian fleet.
they don't have the ability to replace her right now. Yes.
How long do you reckon
And
how long do you reckon she'll solder on?
it's not just a matter of capability. They just did a pretty extensive refit to her, or they're in the process, I should say, of it. The sort of tail end of it.
Yeah.
Like they went in and gutted her engineering spaces.
So they fixed the whole smoking bullshit.
The smoking stuff. A good chunk of the smoking stuff is because the Russian boilers burn mazout.
Well, yeah, that is true. I'm not going to lie, but I mean in terms of things setting on fire randomly.
No, they're a conscript navy.
Bugger.
Like for crying out loud, I've seen Russian troops on exercise try to cook over a fire rations that are not meant to be cooked over a fire and light their frickin' BTR completely on fire because they did it way too close to the BTR that was camouflaged up with a bunch of dry grass because they were out in the steppe on exercise.
God damn it.
And that is a level of mistake that is not exclusive to the Russian conscript. I wish I had Mackinson here in voice.
Oh, I think he's told me that story as well. The one I think I know you're talking
Oh,
about.
I'm not even referencing a specific story because I've heard so many of them about Danish conscripts.
Yeah. He's told me one or two. But 2040, do you think Kuznetsov might finally bow out? And even then, maybe
I'm
not.
not putting a date on it.
Wow, she's just gonna stick around until she can't anymore.
I'm not putting a date.
No, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm not either. I'm just saying she'll stick around until she sticks around.
I can't even say that because I guarantee you there's a ticking clock on there. I just don't know what that's going to be. Like, she's either going to stay in service or she's going to sink. Or she's going to have some sort of damage or incident where it's one specific very well publicized event, Windover. But there are plenty of them like that in multiple conscript militaries. The Russian army is not immune from that, and they are not the best conscript military out there, so take that as you will.
Like, there may be some form of replacement for Kuznetsov in the far distant
and
future.
Absolutely brutalizing their conscripts, Mako. And I mean absolutely brutalizing them. Which is one of the reason commanders get lynched.
I'll not ask you to elaborate on that because I feel like we'd get
I
banned.
will not. There's a reason I use the phrase absolutely brutalizing. I will not go into that.
Damn straight.
That's not even that in particular isn't even a conscripts be conscripts thing.
No, that's not. That's just Russia.
It's a Russian army culture
Like,
issue.
It is entirely possible to have a conscript armed force that doesn't want to shoot everybody above the rank of,
like Denmark.
Insert one
Above
here.
the rank of said conscript you were asking at the time, yes.
Yes.
Like the Nordic countries are a good example.
Mm.
They're not perfect,
but they're not trying to shoot everybody above their rank.
But their system is a damn sight better than the Russian one. And the culture is probably better than the Russian one.
Oh, Mako, the Danish conscripts aren't getting M1 Garands now. Those things are too valuable. They're getting G3s.
Yeah, there's money in those. There's money in those.
They're not selling the M1 Garands. Trust me. Like, the Danes are fucking paranoid. But yes, in the Cold War.
Yeah, World War II left an impact on Denmark. And it's still there to this day. Denmark has basically sworn never again.
No, they haven't. But swearing never again is Poland.
Well, yeah, that's also true. Spitting image is hilarious.
Okay, I want to say that image violates the no politics rule, but
It's spitting image. It's
given
poking.
its well, yes, but still.
I mean, it's got no context to it, so I suppose that lets it through, I guess.
Yeah, Mako, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that that may not stop them from trying.
There's an important thing to realize that just because a nation, by most metrics of logic,
Mako, fleet.
that can I?
There's really no reason to go down that. Like, don't lecture Mako on that.
I wasn't gonna lecture him. I was just making a general point. It wasn't specifically at Mako.
I gotta head out, so y'all have a good one.
Fair enough. We'll go for
Good
another.
ramblings, y'all.
We'll go for another 20 minutes and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah, Poland's armed purchases are something else. Oh, Bull Reed's had a question about Lockheed looking into upgrades for the F-35.
It's not just Lockheed. Later on down the pipeline, the U.S. So the JPO, the Joint Program Office, which is focused on the F-35, does intend an engine upgrade later on down the line. It's up in the air, whether that is going to be accelerated or still be ambiguous. So
Has anyone got any questions?
Well, Mako, that's why I was like, I'm not even gonna put much detail on it other than it's a capability they definitely want to keep. Like,
Okay, in regards to Deadpool versus the Mask would win.
God damn it, guy coming out of nowhere. Thoughts on the Kirovs? They're the final evolution of the Soviet missile cruiser concept.
they aren't.
They aren't.
No. The Kirovs come out of a very weird set of design requirements, largely initially stemming from a cruise range requirement, and that's what led to them being nuclear powered. And no, the backup engines aren't to actually kick them up to speed. They're fully capable of max speed on their nuclear power plant. The backup engines are there just for the same reason they were on the US Californias. In case they had to shut the plant down, they could get home. But yes, they are the end of the line of cruisers. The Kirovs and Slavas are the only two are the last two classes of actual cruiser built. Just bar none. And nobody's built cruisers since because there's less, particularly with universal VLS systems for those that have them or have access to them, there is really no need to make those same trade-offs. That may change, it also may not. Because those trade-offs get you a highly expensive ship that you cannot produce in serious numbers.
Good lord.
But for the Kirovs, they are odd ships. A good chunk of their size stems from a requirement to use the missiles that were on the Oscars, the Granites, which are operational ranged cruise missiles from, to use the Soviet parlance. And on top of that, which, by the way, those missiles, not at all what the Soviets wanted to equip them, or the Soviet Navy wanted to equip them with. They wanted to equip them moving forward with, I don't remember one of the tactical ranged sea skimmers they were working on. I don't think it was Musket, but the order came on down that they'd use granite. And fun fact about granite on the Kirovs, you have to flood the tubes to fire it.
Flood the tubes.
Yeah.
The
Missiles
vertical
were
launch
designed to be
tubes.
fired. They're not vertical, they're angled.
Oh, I thought the more you know. I thought the VLS tubes on the...
No, they're set up exactly like the missile's launch parameters are the same as it would be for an Oscar.
Wow.
Because otherwise you'd have to significantly modify the missile.
So they have to pump water into the tubes to launch the missile.
Anti-ship missiles, yes. The Kirovs are a wildly inefficient design.
You don't say. Christ on a bike. The Slavas seem almost better in comparison.
Gunnery officer, that's not a question I can answer. I'm not going to say the Slavas are better, because as a general task force leading cruiser, the Kirovs are better by a wide margin. But a lot of that comes down to not having a single director. They have two directors for their S-300. I'm not even going to say that, Bull Reeves. If you gave me a choice between a Ticonderoga or a Kirov, and I'm talking the twin-armed Tycho, I'd take the twin-armed Tycho.
Damn.
If you gave me a choice between a VLS Tycho and a Kirov, it'd be the VLS Tycho every fucking day of the week. I wouldn't even have to consider mission. Long Beach or Kirov, I'd take a Kirov. But a VLS Tycho can carry far better surface-to-air armament, conduct that mission better, as well as conduct anti-surface warfare far better. And unlike the missiles that the Kirov fires, her missiles that she can use in anti-ship, Tomahawk, anti-ship missiles, and harpoons are dramatically harder for the Soviets to intercept almost impossible for the Soviets to intercept. The Soviets would be primarily reliant upon jamming to defend themselves and chaff. That's it.
Jamming and chaff with no active defense protection at all.
Yep.
Well,
Because most air defense systems of that period, outside of like Espide, couldn't really engage sea skimmers.
Jesus.
For the Kirovs of today, even their naval tour is very questionable, depending on its on their upgrade status because of their engagement floor. Its best defense against things like Exocet or Harpoon is probably going to be to flip on the hilariously powerful jammers that they have. CSGN, not really, because what it comes down to, Gunnery Officer, is VLS, Mark 41 strike length. That's predominantly what it comes down to. Arleigh Burke, Flight 1 or Kirov will take Arleigh Burke. So long as I have TASM. Like, it's... I can't stress enough that the advent of strike length universal VLS is a huge development in naval warfare. No, it does come down to the ship. Look at the package that you get out of a VLS Tycho, right? You get better radar, you get better combat, infinitely better combat system, infinitely better electronics, better ESM. You get better ASW capability. You get higher volume strike, higher volume like you just handle it better, particularly since we didn't see any Tor equipped Kirovs until after we started seeing VLS Tychos. Now granted, both are vulnerable in that period to sea skimmers. One fleet, though, has a handful of sea skimmers, and one fleet is universally armed with them.
Ah.
The Russians, if you were fighting them north of the GIUK gap in the Greenland or Norwegian seas, aren't going to be able to bring that many sea skimmers to bear. Musket out of the Sovereigns. That's it. At that range. Because you're not taking the missile boats that have musket out that far. What the Russians have to contend with, just from a U.S. Navy surface action group, is Tomahawk, because that's a sea skimmer, and Harpoon. So Mark 26 existed for a long time before Mark 41, and that's the twin arms that are on the Tychos. The Navy had planned the Tychos to be DDGs, and not CGs. There was a cruiser designed to go along with them that was canceled. That was basically an evolution of the Virginias. But the Navy did know that they had Mark 41 in development. They had to modify the... They'd have to modify the the ships somewhat to fit it in. That's why the superstructures are different when you look at them closely. But what they got was dramatically more missiles. A twin-arm Tycho is like 96 missiles. Okay? And they're all medium range only. Or I shouldn't say 90. So you have 96 slots in your Mark 20 between your two Mark 26 magazines. You're going to have a mix of ASRock, because Mark 26 is capable of firing ASRock, and you're going to have SM2 on there. Some Mark 26s got Harpoon. The Tychos didn't. They had canister launched. I've heard 96, but if it's 88, that makes the point even more. But you have that. Now you look at the Arleigh Burkes, and now you see why the Navy jumped on them. Thank you, Sierra. Look at Sierra's number on the missiles. So you got to understand that standoff deployed torpedoes don't function like wire guide, or even over the side torpedoes do not function like a wire guided torpedo from a submarine. Okay, they are much easier to evade, and if your job is to ride shotgun on a carrier running up to off the North Cape to go whale on the Soviet fleet, right? You're gonna need ASRock. You're gonna need standard missiles. You've got a lot to balance there. You need a lot of ordnance going up that far.
A hell of a lot.
Because you had to design that in on them. The sprue cans could get away with it because they had space to move some of those compartments around, because the pepper box has a magazine that would no longer be used. The Tychos really did not have that. Every ounce of their design was being used. And they maintained enough capability with the twin arms that it was fine. And it was only the first handful of ships, and they were planning on building 26 of them, I think. So it was like the first 4 ships that didn't get it. Somebody correct me on the numbers there if I'm wrong, but it's something like that.
I can't not be there, Chief. This is your area of expertise, not mine.
What were you talking about? I was talking about the gunnery officer's question. What were you asking about?
I don't think he was. I had just taken a sip of tea.
No, as in, like, what was the question before? Because I was typing. You had like a correct me if I'm wrong thing. I was like, I didn't hear you.
On the number of Tychos.
Oh,
I think it was like 4 with twin arms.
It's 5.
Maybe 5? Okay. I was about to say 4, maybe 6, but yeah.
Because it's Ticonderoga, Yorktown, the V1 I'm trying to remember, Valley Forge, and then that one named after a person. Thomas S. Gates, yes. So it's Vincent's, which was the one that shot down the Iranian one. Yeah, it's 5.
Which version of Tycho went over? And Cotters, I would absolutely take Musket over Basalt. One of them is a sea skimmer. It's not Basalt. Yeah, Musket's, I think, shorter range. It may not be. But, like, you need sea skimmers. because particularly in that period, almost nobody can reliably engage them. Mosket is sort of right in the gray area for things like SM2. It would be very stressful, but potentially doable. Basalt, absolutely in the realm of engagement. That's going to depend on Bull Reeves. That's going to depend on factors that we can't predict.
Yeah, like you could stretch the definition and just call like the GX a cruiser, and then just be like,
Phoenix, are you currently listening? If you are, DM me if you're able to hop in voice. I don't want to lose my voice before I go back to work. So I'll just let you type that then for what you want to call a cruiser. Phoenix and I have slightly different characteristics, but they're close.
See, I approached it. I approach it with the Japanese mindset. Everything's an escort ship.
I had some people I had to educate on another server about that.
What, the escort ship thing, or?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a translation thing, which is kind of hilarious. But it literally just like, I think in terms of an actual like definition from Japanese, I think it's just better to just call it warship. There's. Yeah.
Everything's an escort for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point.
So, well, actually, the submarines aren't, but well, submarines. Anyways, VLS Tycho compared to Flight 2 Arle. I'd actually take the Flight 2 Arle because, yeah, having ANSPY 1D versus AB or something would be nice.
So long as you're not trying to do integrated air and missile, yeah.
Yeah.
And by air and missile, I mean regular air breathing and BMD. For those who don't know what that what that phrase actually means. Yeah, so long as I'm just doing regular air defense things, absolutely. And not having to throw out full power and try to scan all of the sky. So for a good chunk of the Cold War, the U.S. did have, and I don't remember the name of it, a standoff. It wasn't Sea Lance. Sea Lance, I think, was the one that got canceled. But yeah, it's not as unique of a capability as it is now. Frangible, no. Although that would be a very British definition of it. But that is not the rest of the world's definition of it.
I mean, it also is like, what is an AAW escort? Because then we have, or is the Connie's an AAW? I mean,
are you calling AAW anti-air warfare or area air warfare?
Yes.
It matters. Because if you look at it as anti-air warfare, and that's your definition for, it's a guided missile combatant, then the Type 26s would be a guided missile combatant. If you are the U.S. Navy and your definition is based on area air warfare, then no. But the Constellations would be, because they have that medium range capability. Get that freaking BAE design proposal away from me. That went nowhere, and for good reason. So originally they were designed to be destroyers, guided missile destroyers. Hence when you look at the whole numbers, they start at 47. But then the planned guided missile cruisers were killed. One thing led to another. The Navy A wanted O5 billets. B needed that command ship, hence the O5 billet. But C also still needed cruisers, so they did that. But it's not the official British definition, frangible, I'm aware, but it is rapidly becoming the practical British definition. When you look at the past 45 years of British shipbuilding and Royal Navy force structure. I think we have hit Fleet's 20-minute mark, though.
Yes, I will. I will run away with the definition that if Terrier is like long range air defense, it makes a ship a cruiser, then USS Giat is a cruiser.
Largely put it in the time where both them and the Arleigh Burkes were being built, Bull Reeves, it's the dedicated command planning spaces. That's it. Well, and I guess the extra 30-ish% VLS, but that would be it. And realistically speaking, it's a poor excuse. They're still destroyers. As Phoenix put there, the Burkes are kind of weird and lacking it. Even by US DDG standards for when they were designed.
I mean, if we go back to the old days in terms of a cruiser definition, it would be the sustainment and capability to cruise, which
hilariously
that's
a US frigate role now.
Yeah, which is do we call we should clearly by then just call every ship's a cruiser because they can, cruise and do the cruising patrol role. So, I'll have you know, we had the U.S. had a very long period of calling frigates or cruiser-sized objects in our modern definition as frigates. So, yeah. Also, the only reason why I came in here is because I saw a Belgium mention.
Oh. Don't get me
Belgium deserves to be destroyed.
I'm just saying, it'd be really funny if there was
a lot easier if the Dutch got actual tanks that they owned back, right?
No, it's the hilarious definition of the Belgians have better thermal optics than the fucking Soviets do. God bless the curse that is a first Belgian Corps.
Proxy fuses aren't a thing on anti-ship missiles, generally.
I mean, Talos.
Hence the general. I mean, if we want to count standards, then as well, and dual use SAMs, sure, but Yeah, a lot of the more smart fusing now, you do have options. But yeah, something like Granite is just not going to have a proxy fuse on it. There's very little point. The whole point of that missile is to detonate inside the enemy ship.
Proxy can, I mean, well, at the very least, in the naval context, yes, proxy is very much for anti-aircraft purposes. So,
Well, and anti-small craft, but yes.
I mean, from a historical standpoint, and even that by then, like, I don't know if you want to waste a SM2ER against the fucking small riverine boat. I guess SM2.
I was referring to the various different shell types you have out there.
Oh yeah.
'Cause I looked over and I saw the 5-inch mount.
I was just like, I was thinking for missiles. I'm just like, I'm not so sure you're gonna blow up a skid with a fucking SM2ER.
I mean, we've smacked them into missile craft.
I mean, you can Hellfire makes absolute sense in the modern period, but also a guy with a guy inside of a helicopter shooting an M240 does that as well. So, you know. Now, see if you have a guy in a helicopter with a M220, you know, you could do that better, but. The idea, though, of just like the fatwa against piracy is going to be met with hellfires is really funny to me. At least from like a UN response. Anyways, I gotta play more Baldur's Gate.
I don't know the guns well enough, gunnery officer. I mean, you are slinging a 5-inch shell versus a 4.5-inch shell, but I don't know the particulars. Yeah, she was a perfectly viable sort of medium-esque fleet carrier for the U.S. Navy. For lower end jobs, she wasn't ever going to ram her way up into the North Atlantic or go after the Soviet Pacific Bastion. But
I've just realised I've been muted for the last bloody half an hour, and you didn't even hear me say I was extending it for another bloody 15 minutes. Fucking Christ.
But yeah, no, she was perfectly viable for all but the highest end stuff. She's able to show up with a full air wing of FA-18 Legacy Hornets, A6s, E2s.
So, 5 more minutes, folks. If you've got any very, very quick to answer rapid fire questions, now is the time.
Cake or pie?
Pie. I don't like cake. I know, shoot me now. Cyclic's just a guy who knows things. Lots of things. Like, it's kind of ridiculous how much he knows.
Cereal is not a soup. Soup is made with water.
Funny you are. He asked this question. He used to ask this question every time. That was the first time he's asked it in a long time. Christ, what a ramblings this has been. I don't know actually why we call things Flight 1, Flight 2, Flight 3.
Is the U.S. Navy decided they were going to do that?
Is that it? Is it that simple?
That's it.
Wow. Okay. Whereas why did they go with flight instead of batch?
Because we're not the Brits.
Yeah, that's a point.
The Brits do the same thing, just with batch. Like,
the man's got a point. Right, so if one last question. So if you want to ask a question, I'll pick the one that I want to answer to finish up.
no, Wendover, they don't.
Sidious, I would not say that you can compare Death of Stalin and Blackadder. Because one is a movie, the other is a series.
Hmm. Okay. Final question will be thoughts on the Chaffee light tank. Was it a bit overgun with the 75mm gun from the Sherman for a light tank? No, I'd say it showed the way light tanks were going.
Like, if anything, the 37 on the Stuarts was undergunned quite dramatically.
And that is time. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Hope you enjoyed the surprise Drac appearance. Wasn't even planned. You all just asked me to ask him, so I asked him. And that's why we love him, because he makes time in his day for us. Thank you, Cyclic, for showing up, as usual. Wealth of knowledge.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Guy, for showing up, as usual. Dutchness.
No problem.
And for everyone else, take care, folks, and I'll catch